Before we begin, take a moment to settle where you are. Let the room grow still. Let the world outside soften. Tonight, we are not racing through battles or memorizing dates. We are stepping slowly into a long, quiet stretch of human time. A world where history moved at the pace of footsteps in mud, of smoke rising from wooden roofs, of generations passing without knowing their own ending. This is the story of the Anglo-Saxons, but not as it is usually told. Not as kings shouting orders, or armies clashing at dawn, but as ordinary people waking to cold mornings, measuring life by harvests, fear, faith, and sleep. People who did not know they were living at the beginning of England, or near its transformation. They only knew the weight of the day ahead, and the darkness waiting each night. You will hear about migrations across gray seas, villages carved from forests, laws remembered instead of written, and faith carried quietly from hand to hand. You will pass through centuries where life was fragile. Nights were long, and survival depended more on cooperation than courage. Nothing here demands your attention. Nothing here requires effort. If your mind drifts, that is part of the journey. History was lived that way, half-aware, repetitive, shaped by routines rather than events. Before we set off, if you enjoy these quiet dives into history, please like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely do. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always a small wonder to see this sleepy audience scattered across the map. Now, as the noise of the present fades, we begin in a land just after Rome has left, where roads crumble into grass, authority dissolves into memory, and a new world begins without realizing it has begun. Close your eyes if you wish. Segment 1 waits patiently. Part 1. Arrival in a broken land, Britain after Rome. The cold, gray light of a distant autumn sun struggled to pierce the perpetual cloud cover that clung to the island. Here, on the western edge of the known world, a profound stillness had settled, a vast, echoing silence that spoke of abandonment. This was Britain after Rome, an island emptied of authority, drifting into uncertainty, its once proud roads crumbling, its cities standing as hollow shells, awaiting a new history yet to be written in blood and soil. Imagine the wind, a ceaseless, mournful presence, sighing through the overgrown ruins of a Roman villa. Its once tiled roof, long since collapsed, now provided shelter only for nesting birds or a few hardy wild animals. The scent of damp earth, decaying plaster, and encroaching wilderness hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the distant memory of Roman incense and warm bread. For nearly 4 centuries, Britannia had been a Roman province, bound to the vast empire by legions, laws, and imperial will. Its cities, though modest by Roman standards, had pulsed with administrative life. Its villas had flourished. Its trade routes had connected it to a larger ordered world. Then, in the early 5th century, the legions withdrew, recalled to defend a crumbling empire closer to its heart, leaving behind a land utterly transformed, yet suddenly, profoundly vulnerable. Listen to the subtle rustle of dry leaves, stirred by the ceaseless wind, as they skittered across the mosaic floor of a deserted Roman bathhouse. Hear the distant bleating of untended sheep, or the mournful caw of a crow from a crumbling watchtower. See the remnants of a once great fort, its stone walls still formidable, but its gates broken, its barracks empty, now serving only as a grim monument to a vanished power. An island emptied of authority, drifting into uncertainty. The Romanized Britons, accustomed to imperial protection and governance, found themselves suddenly alone, without the centralized power that had ordered their lives for generations. The elaborate administrative structures, the sophisticated legal system, the disciplined military all had simply dissolved, leaving a bewildering vacuum. Chaos, swift and brutal, often followed. Raids from Picts and Scots, fierce warrior tribes from the north, grew bolder. Pirates from the sea, Saxons, Angles, and Jutes, began to probe the vulnerable coastlines, seeking plunder and new lands. The Britons, fragmented and lacking a unified leadership, struggled to defend themselves, clinging to what remnants of Roman order they could salvage. The city's once vibrant centers slowly began to wither. Their magnificent public buildings, their fora, their temples, their elaborate bathhouses all fell into disrepair, their aqueducts crumbling, their purposes forgotten. These were no longer places of imperial grandeur, but hollow shells, haunted by the ghosts of a vanished civilization, gradually reclaimed by the encroaching wilderness. The psychological impact was immense. Generations had known only Roman rule. Now, the very foundation of their world had been pulled out from under them. Uncertainty became the dominant emotion, a gnawing dread about the future, a desperate longing for order and stability that seemed to have vanished with the legions. An island emptied of authority, drifting into uncertainty. Britain after Rome was a profound epic, a chilling testament to the fragility of even the mightiest empires. It was a calm, immersive descent into a broken land, charting the migration, kingdoms, and faith that would shape its new identity, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of marble ruins and the profound silence of a world adrift, waiting for new footsteps to fill its empty spaces. Crossing the North Sea, beyond the gray, abandoned shores of Britain, across the restless expanse of the North Sea, a different kind of desperation stirred. It was not the despair of a crumbling empire, but the raw, driving hunger of a people seeking new lands, a fresh start in a world reshaped by climate and conflict. Small boats carried families, not armies, launching from the frigid coasts of Germania and Jutland, their wooden hulls mere shells against the vast, unpredictable waves, driven by the lure of a fertile, if broken, island. Imagine the biting wind, a relentless force that whips spray from the dark, churning waves, stinging exposed skin, stealing breath from the throats of those huddled in the open vessels. The air, thick with the pungent aroma of brine, damp wood, and the subtle tang of human apprehension, clung to every rough woolen cloak and weathered face. Here, in the belly of the North Sea, the familiar sounds of land, the rustle of leaves, the lowing of cattle were utterly lost, replaced by the ceaseless rhythmic roar of the ocean. These were the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, Germanic tribes from the low-lying lands of what is now northern Germany and Denmark. Their homelands, perhaps struggling with overpopulation, dwindling resources, or encroaching sea levels, no longer offered a sustainable future. Rumors of a fertile, undefended island to the west, abandoned by its Roman protectors, beckoned like a distant, flickering torch in the vast darkness. Listen to the rhythmic creak of wooden planks, groaning under the immense strain of the waves, a constant symphony that vibrated through the very hull, connecting each family to the ship's struggle. Hear the muffled cries of infants, quickly soothed by anxious mothers, their voices lost in the roar of the wind. See the small, open boats, their simple square sails catching the biting wind, their sturdy wooden frames a fragile defiance against the immense, untamed power of the ocean. Small boats carried families, not armies. These were not grand, disciplined naval fleets, but individual vessels, often converted fishing boats or small longships, laden not with soldiers and siege engines, but with entire families, men, women, children, their meager possessions, tools, seeds, a few animals all packed tightly into the cramped, exposed space. Their voyage was a desperate gamble, a terrifying leap of faith into the profound unknown. The North Sea, a treacherous expanse of unpredictable currents, sudden storms, and biting cold, was a formidable adversary. Days blurred into nights, marked only by the shifting light of the sky or the terrifying onset of a tempest. Food and water, meticulously rationed, dwindled. Fear, primal and pervasive, was a constant companion, gnawing at their resolve, amplified by the vastness of the ocean and the knowledge of unseen dangers lurking beneath the dark waves. The sight of the horizon, endlessly stretching in every direction, could fill the heart with profound despair. There were no maps to guide them, no compasses to ensure their course. They relied on rudimentary navigation skills, the direction of the sun, the patterns of the stars when visible, the flight of birds, the subtle shifts in wind and current, and an unshakable ancestral intuition for the sea. The cold was insidious. It seeped through their rough woolen clothing, through the layered animal hides, chilling them to the bone. Salt spray, whipped by the wind, coated their faces, their hair, their everything, mingling with their sweat and tears, a constant, gritty reminder of their profound immersion in the maritime environment. Their journey was a testament to extraordinary courage, driven by the desperate hope for a new home, a new future. They left behind a dying world, driven by a profound, unyielding instinct to survive. First settlements. After the perilous crossing of the North Sea, driven by desperation and the promise of a new beginning, the weary Anglo-Saxon and Jute families finally sighted land. Britain's shores, once a distant rumor, now loomed, a mixture of foreboding cliffs and inviting estuaries. Humble wooden halls began to rise among the ruins of stone, charting the tentative, arduous beginnings of a new era, where ancient Roman grandeur provided both materials and haunting echoes for nascent Anglo-Saxon life. Imagine the biting wind, now carrying the scent of damp earth, unfamiliar trees, and the salt-tinged aroma of their arduous journey. The sounds were no longer the relentless roar of the ocean. They included the rhythmic thud of crude axes felling trees, the scrape of rough timber against stone, and the low murmur of cautious voices directing communal effort. Mist drifting over the land softened the harsh lines of the broken Roman forts, transforming them into ghostly silhouettes. The Britons, fragmented and struggling for their own survival, offered little organized resistance at first. The newcomers, often arriving in small, family-based groups, sought out accessible coastal areas, river estuaries, and fertile river valleys, places that offered fresh water, suitable land for cultivation, and defensible positions. Their first priority was always shelter, a temporary haven against the elements and any lingering threats. Listen to the rhythmic thud of crude stone axes against newly felled timber, the sound of determined human effort echoing through the quiet landscape. Hear the low murmur of commands, given in a guttural Old English, directing men to clear brush, to shape logs, to dig foundations. See the rough, strong hands, calloused by seafaring and labor, working tirelessly, their breaths pluming white in the cold air. Wooden halls rose among ruins of stone. The landscape they found was a stark contrast of decay and potential. Roman cities, once vibrant centers, stood largely abandoned, their monumental stone structures, villas, forts, bathhouses, crumbling into disrepair. These ruins, however, were not simply obstacles. They were quarries, offering ready-made stone and bricks for the newcomers. But the Anglo-Saxons were a people of wood. Their traditional dwellings, their halls, their feasting places, were typically constructed from sturdy timber, reflecting their northern European heritage. Their settlements were modest, often just clusters of timber halls, surrounded by wattle fences or earthen niches for defense. The design was simple, a large rectangular wooden hall with a central hearth for fire and smoke, and smaller adjacent structures for animals or storage. The communal hall was the heart of their new existence, a place for feasting, for storytelling, for decision-making, binding the nascent community in shared purpose. The proximity to Roman ruins was often unavoidable. A new Anglo-Saxon hall might rise just outside the walls of a deserted Roman fort, or its foundations might be laid directly upon the remains of a collapsed Roman villa. The contrast was stark, the enduring permanence of Roman stone, however broken, against the relative impermanence of Anglo-Saxon wood. The psychological impact was immense. To build a new home, to clear land, to plant crops, was an act of profound hope and determination. It was a declaration of intent, a commitment to this new, broken land. Yet, the ruins that surrounded them were a constant, silent reminder of the transience of even the mightiest civilizations, a subtle warning for their own future. The first settlements were born of necessity and hard labor. This era transformed Britain, slowly replacing a faded Roman identity with a new, vibrant, and distinctly Germanic culture. It was a constant struggle, forging a new identity from the remnants of an old world. Conflict with the Britons. Having established their first wooden halls among the silent, crumbling stones of Romang Britain, the arriving Anglo-Saxons faced an inevitable, brutal confrontation. This was not an empty land awaiting their claim. It was a fragmented island, still inhabited by the descendants of its original Celtic peoples, now Romanized Britons, clinging to their ancestral territories. Land was claimed slowly, often violently, transforming initial settlement into centuries of relentless, bloody conflict, where the clash of shield and spear shaped the very topography of a New England. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the metallic tang of fear and fresh blood, mingled with the acrid smell of burning timber and the pervasive scent of human desperation. The sounds were no longer the rhythmic thud of axes. They included the terrifying shouts of warriors, the clash of shield and spear, the desperate cries of the wounded, and the mournful wails of women. Mist drifting over fields at dawn, now often illuminated by the glow of burning villages, obscured individual horrors in a haze of brutal, indiscriminate violence. The Anglo-Saxons, arriving in successive waves from the continent, were driven by a desire for fertile land and a perceived opportunity in a weakened Britain. The Britons, for their part, were a people struggling for survival. Their centralized Roman authority gone, their populations diminished by plague and famine, but fiercely determined to defend their homes and their heritage. Listen to the terrifying shouts of warriors. Their guttural Old English, or early Anglo-Saxon dialects, clashing with the ancient British Celtic tongues, a cacophony of fear and aggression. Hear the sharp clang of iron weapons meeting shields, the splintering crack of wood, the desperate cries of men, and the mournful wails of women as their homes were put to the torch. See the crude, round wooden shields painted with tribal designs, meeting the more sophisticated Roman-style shields of the Britons, a clash of old and new. Land was claimed slowly, often violently. A process of Anglo-Saxon settlement was not a single unified conquest, but a long, piecemeal, and often brutal series of incursions, battles, and territorial encroachments. Small Anglo-Saxon warbands would establish a foothold, often after initial invitations to serve as mercenaries against Pictish raids, then gradually expand their control, pushing the Britons westward. The warfare was fierce and relentless. Battles were often localized, brutal affairs, fought with spear, sword, and axe. Villages were burned, fields laid waste, populations displaced or enslaved. The Britons, sometimes led by heroic figures like the legendary King Arthur, if such a figure truly existed, fought fiercely, but their fragmented leadership and internal divisions often hampered their ability to mount a sustained, unified defense. The geographical impact was profound. The Anglo-Saxons gradually pushed the Britons westwards, driving them into the mountainous regions of Wales, Wellis, meaning foreigners or strangers in Old English, and the southwest, Dumnonia. The cultural landscape of Britain was irrevocably altered, replacing the Latin and Celtic influences with a new Germanic language and identity. The psychological toll was immense. For the Britons, it was a period of profound loss, of cultural erosion, of desperate struggle against an overwhelming tide of invasion. For the Anglo-Saxons, it was a period of constant vigilance, a brutal conquest, of forging a new home through relentless violence. Conflict with the Britons shaped the very destiny of an island. This was a profound epic, a chilling testament to the fragility of human settlement. It was a calm, immersive journey through an island emptied of authority, charting the migration, kingdoms, and faith that would shape its new identity. Forever tethered to the quiet echoes of vanished voices and the profound silence of a vast, unforgiving land, waiting for new footsteps to fill its empty spaces, often with bloodshed. Becoming the Anglo-Saxons. After generations of brutal conflict with the indigenous Britons, fought over every river valley and every fertile plain, a profound transformation began to coalesce among the disparate Germanic tribes who had crossed the North Sea. This was not a sudden decree, but a slow, organic evolution. Becoming the Anglo-Saxons was a defining process. Identity formed through language, land, and survival, transforming varied tribal loyalties into a shared cultural heritage, forging a new people and a new nation in the crucible of adaptation and fierce struggle on a conquered island. Imagine the air, crisp and bracing, thick with the earthy scent of damp earth, newly tilled fields, and the subtle tang of human presence, mingling with the pervasive aroma of wood smoke. The sounds were no longer just the clash of warring tribes. They included the low murmur of communal work, the rhythmic splash of oars on river currents, and the evolving cadences of a shared tongue. Wooden halls rose among ruins of stone, now inhabited by a people slowly, inexorably, becoming one. The Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, initially distinct tribal groups with their own dialects and customs, had arrived in waves, settling in different regions of Britain. But as they intermingled, fought alongside each other against the Britons, and established common settlements, a process of cultural fusion began. Their separate identities slowly blurred, giving way to a new shared sense of belonging. Listen to the low murmur of voices around a communal hearth, speaking a language slowly evolving from their various Germanic dialects into what would become Old English. Hear the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, shaping iron for tools and weapons, its sound echoing through a newly established village. See the intricate patterns of their early settlements, clusters of timber halls and wattle and daub huts, growing more permanent, more cohesive, slowly replacing the remnants of Roman order. Identity formed through language, land, and survival. Language was a powerful unifying force. The various Germanic dialects, through constant interaction and intermarriage, gradually coalesced into a common tongue, English or Old English. This shared language became a fundamental marker of their new identity, distinguishing them from the Celtic-speaking Britons and from their continental cousins. It was the medium through which their stories, their laws, and their communal bonds were forged. And survival was the ultimate crucible. The constant warfare with the Britons, the ongoing threat of external raids, the challenges of establishing new communities in a foreign land. These shared struggles forged a fierce collective identity. They were survivors, a new people, united by a common past of migration and conquest, bound by the immediate demands of living together. The psychological impact was immense. The slow process of shedding old tribal loyalties and embracing a new shared identity provided a profound sense of belonging, a collective purpose in a dangerous world. It was a testament to human adaptability, to the capacity to forge new bonds and new cultures in the crucible of migration and conflict. Their new identity was forged in the relentless struggle. Becoming the Anglo-Saxons was a profound epoch, a chilling testament to the fragility of human settlement. It was a calm, immersive journey through an island emptied of authority, charting the migration, kingdoms, and faith that would shape its new identity. Forever tethered to the quiet echoes of language and the profound silence of a vast, unforgiving land, waiting for new footsteps to fill its empty spaces as a new people emerged to claim their destiny. Part 2. Life in early Anglo-Saxon England. With their new identity forged in the crucible of conflict and their wooden halls rising amidst ancient ruins, the Anglo-Saxons faced the immediate, unyielding imperative of survival on an unfamiliar island. Daily life revolved around soil and seasons, a relentless, back-breaking dance with the earth that dictated every rhythm, every decision, and every ounce of human effort. This was farming the New World, a profound act of adaptation, transforming wild landscapes into fertile fields, and underpinning the very foundation of their burgeoning kingdoms. Imagine the crisp, biting air of an early spring morning, thick with the earthy scent of damp, freshly plowed soil, manure, and the subtle tang of human presence. The sounds were no longer the clash of spears. They included the rhythmic creak of wooden plows, the lowing of straining oxen, the shouts of farmers, and the ceaseless caw of crows circling overhead. Mist drifting over fields at dawn, barely lifting, revealed rows of bent figures, merging with the gray landscape. The land they had claimed, often wrested from the Britons, was a patchwork of varied terrain-dense forests, rolling hills, and fertile river valleys. While some areas had remnants of Roman agriculture, much required arduous clearing. Trees had to be felled, stumps removed, and the stubborn earth broken for the first time. This was foundational work, demanding immense communal effort and unwavering perseverance. Listen to the rhythmic creak of the wooden plow, groaning as it cut through the stubborn, damp earth, turning over shallow furrows. Hear the low, strained lowing of the oxen, their powerful bodies straining against their yokes, their breath pluming white in the cold air. See the long, dark lines of newly turned earth stretching behind you, a testament to relentless, back-breaking toil, slowly transforming the wild into a canvas for cultivation. Daily life revolved around soil and seasons. Their entire existence was inextricably linked to the unpredictable bounty of the land and the relentless cycles of the year. Spring brought the arduous task of plowing and sowing precious seeds: barley, wheat, rye, oats, a desperate gamble on future sustenance. Summer demanded constant weeding, tending crops under the sun's relentless gaze, and guarding against pests and disease. Autumn brought the critical, exhaustive period of harvest, gathering the life-giving grain that would determine survival through the coming winter. The tools were rudimentary, heavy, and worn. A simple wooden plow, its share often tipped with iron. A short-handled hoe, a crude sickle, a sturdy wooden rake. Each implement was an extension of their own muscle, demanding every ounce of physical strength, every day, from dawn until dusk. Children, from a young age, assisted with chores like scaring birds or gathering kindling, their small bodies absorbed into the relentless rhythm. The psychological impact of this ceaseless labor was immense. The constant awareness of their utter dependence on the land, the gnawing fear of a failed harvest, the pervasive cold of winter, these hardships permeated every moment. But there was also a profound connection to the earth, a deep satisfaction in seeing the fruits of their toil, a quiet pride in their ability to coax life from the soil. This was not solitary work. Farmers toiled in communal open fields, their strips of land intermingled, their efforts often coordinated, relying on each other for assistance, for shared knowledge, for mutual support. The village itself was a collective enterprise, its survival inextricably linked to the successful cultivation of its surrounding lands. The work was endless, but it was the foundation of their new world. Farming the New World transformed their scattered settlements into viable communities, creating the economic bedrock upon which their kingdoms would slowly rise. It was a constant struggle, etching itself into the very soul of the Anglo-Saxon people, a testament to their unwavering endurance. Village and kinship. Beyond the endless furrows and the relentless rhythm of the seasons, the true bedrock of early Anglo-Saxon existence lay not in individual effort, but in the intricate, unbreakable bonds of family. In this nascent society, still carving its place on a fragmented island, village and kinship were synonymous. Family determined safety and status. transforming personal lineage into a powerful, unwritten code that dictated allegiances, provided protection, and underpinned every aspect of their social structure, from the humblest hearth to the highest hall. Imagine the air, thick with the earthy scent of wood smoke, brewing ale, and the intimate aroma of human presence, mingling with the subtle tang of damp straw. The sounds were no longer the creak of plows. They included the low murmur of communal conversations, the laughter of children, and the solemn cadence of shared stories. Mist drifting over fields at dawn, barely lifting, revealed clusters of wooden halls, each sheltering a network of kin. The Anglo-Saxon village was typically a small, tightly knit community, often comprising no more than a few dozen families. Life was intensely communal, driven by mutual interdependence. Survival, from plowing fields to defending against raids, relied on cooperation, on shared labor, on unwavering loyalty. At the heart of this intricate web lay the family, the sin, extending far beyond the immediate household to encompass a broader network of blood relatives. Listen to the low murmur of conversations around a communal hearth, their tones imbued with familiar affection and shared understanding. Hear the laughter of children, their games weaving through the small, crowded space, their presence a constant reminder of the continuity of the bloodline. See the faces of men and women, their expressions etched with the weariness of toil, yet softened by the profound comfort of belonging, their lives inextricably linked to those around them. Family determined safety and status. Your place in the world, your very identity, was largely defined by your lineage. Your family provided your primary protection. In a lawless landscape, your kin were your defenders, bound by sacred oath and custom to avenge any wrong done to you. If a member of your family was killed, the wurgeld, the man price paid in compensation, was due to your kin, not just to you, underscoring the collective nature of justice. Status, too, flowed from kinship. The chieftain, alderman, or king, drawing his authority from a prestigious lineage, was surrounded by his own loyal kin. Even within the village, certain families held greater influence. Their status often derived from their ancestry, their wealth in land or livestock, and their network of relations. To be a member of a strong, numerous sin was to possess inherent social standing and a measure of security. Marriage was not simply a matter of personal affection. It was a strategic alliance, forging new bonds between families, consolidating land, and ensuring the continuation of the bloodline. Disputes between individuals often escalated into feuds between entire kin groups, demanding careful mediation and swift resolution to prevent wider societal breakdown. The psychological impact of this pervasive kinship system was immense. It instilled a profound sense of belonging, a deep-seated identity rooted in family. But it also bred a constant awareness of obligation, of loyalty, of the collective responsibility for the actions of one's kin. The fear of shaming one's family, of bringing dishonor upon the sin, was a powerful motivator, shaping every decision, every interaction. This intricate web of relationships ensured a fragile social cohesion in a turbulent age. Village and kinship, intertwined and unbreakable, formed the essential architecture of early Anglo-Saxon life, a testament to the enduring power of blood bonds. This profound connection, where family determined safety and status, was a defining aspect of early Anglo-Saxon England. It revealed a society built on intimate, personal ties. Navigating a broken land, where the quiet strength of kinship became the ultimate shield against uncertainty and peril. Wooden halls and hearths, aeon the unbreakable bonds of kinship that held the early Anglo-Saxon village together. The very architecture of their dwellings reflected a profound understanding of communal life and the necessities of a harsh climate. Wooden halls and hearths were the beating heart of their existence. Homes built for warmth, smoke, and community, transforming simple timber and mud into vital sanctuaries against the biting cold. and underpinning the daily rhythms of their nascent society with shared light and enduring human presence. Imagine the pervasive chill of an Anglo-Saxon winter, a cold that seeped into the very bones of the land. Inside the long, rectangular timber halls, the air, thick with the earthy scent of drying wood, damp earth, and the pervasive aroma of wood smoke, mingled with the subtle tang of human presence. The sounds were no longer the distant clamor of the fields. They included the low murmur of quiet conversation, the soft crackle and pop of a central fire, and the gentle breathing of a family huddled close. Smoke curling through crooked chimneys or smoke holes defined the very breath of their homes. The Anglo-Saxons were a people of wood. Their dwellings, unlike the stone remnants of Roman Britain, were typically constructed from sturdy timber frames, with walls of wattle and daub, interwoven branches plastered with mud and straw, and massive, steeply pitched thatched roofs. These halls, sometimes quite large, were not merely shelters. They were communal spaces, designed for collective living and warmth. Listen to the rhythmic crackle and pop of the central hearth fire, its flames dancing against the rough timber beams of the roof, a constant, comforting symphony against the profound silence of the winter night. Hear the low murmur of conversation, hushed but continuous, as families shared stories, mended tools, or simply found solace in each other's presence. See the smoke, thick and gray, swirling lazily upwards, clinging to the soot-stained rafters, eventually finding its way out through a smoke hole in the roof, or seeping through gaps in the thatch. Homes built for warmth, smoke, and community. The central hearth, a carefully contained fire pit on the packed earth floor, was the undisputed heart of the dwelling. Its radiant heat, however unevenly distributed, was absolutely essential for survival in the biting cold. It cooked their meals, provided light against the absolute darkness, and offered a focal point for all communal activity. Smoke was an inescapable companion. Lacking modern chimneys, the halls were perpetually smoky, stinging the eyes and lungs, leaving a permanent, dark patina on the interior timbers. Yet this acrid haze served a purpose beyond warmth. It deterred insects, preserved hides, and was believed to ward off malevolent spirits, providing a perceived, if uncomfortable, layer of protection. Community was woven into the very structure of these homes. The single large room often housed an entire extended family, sometimes even a small group of warriors or laborers. Sleeping arrangements were communal, with individuals or families lying on straw pallets around the hearth, their bodies pressed close for shared warmth. This profound proximity fostered deep bonds of interdependence and collective endurance. The robust thatched roofs, often several feet thick, provided remarkable insulation against the snow and cold. The mud-daubed walls, strong and earthy, kept out the bitter winds, creating a surprisingly resilient barrier against the elements. Yet, the constant battle against damp, cold, and smoke was ceaseless. This architecture, simple yet profoundly effective, transformed basic materials into sophisticated tools of survival. It enabled Anglo-Saxon communities to weather the harsh British climate, providing the essential warmth and communal cohesion necessary for their burgeoning society. Its story, etched in every smoke-stained beam, whispered of shared survival. Wooden halls and hearths were a profound reality of early Anglo-Saxon England, a testament to how life revolved around soil and seasons, charting the humble beginnings of their new world, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of communal warmth and the enduring strength of simple, ingenious homes. Food, hunger, and feast formed an unyielding cyclical rhythm. Scarcity defined most days. Feasts were rare, transforming every morsel into a precious commodity, and underpinning a pervasive anxiety about sustenance that shaped their communal rituals, their economic decisions, and their very understanding of life's ephemeral joys. Imagine the air inside a humble wooden hall, thick with the earthy scent of wood smoke, damp straw, and the subtle tang of human presence, now permeated by the faint, comforting aroma of stale bread or, on rare occasions, roasted meat. The sounds were no longer the gentle breathing of a sleeping family. They included the low murmur of hungry bellies, the rhythmic crunch of coarse bread, and the hushed sighs of a family trying to find satisfaction in meager fare. Mist drifting over fields at dawn, barely lifting, revealed a landscape of constant underlying need. For the vast majority of Anglo-Saxon peasants, their diet was monotonous and meager, consisting primarily of grains. Fresh meat was a rare luxury, vegetables were seasonal, and spices were unattainable. Survival hinged on the successful cultivation of barley, wheat, rye, and oats, and the careful management of their yield. Listen to the low murmur of hungry bellies, a persistent, uncomfortable rumble against the quiet morning sounds, a constant reminder of the body's demands. Hear the rhythmic crunch of hard, stale bread as it was slowly, deliberately chewed, its texture tough and dry. See the single, coarse loaf, dark and dense, often a day or two old, broken into portions and passed around the family. Its simple form a profound symbol of their precarious existence. Scarcity defined most days. After the Lord's share and the church's tithe were exacted, the remaining portion of the harvest for the peasant family was often tragically small. This meant careful rationing, meticulous conservation, and constant vigilance against pests and spoilage. Hunger was a pervasive underlying ache that intensified during the lean winter months, forcing families to rely on meager stored roots, dried pulses, or what little they could forage from the unforgiving land. Feasts were rare. These were extraordinary events, communal celebrations typically held for major religious holidays, successful hunts, or the Lord's occasional generosity. Such feasts were lavish by peasant standards. Roasted meat, rich stews, copious amounts of ale or mead, and perhaps even some fine bread. They were moments of profound joy and communal bonding, a temporary reprieve from the relentless scarcity, eagerly anticipated and long remembered. The psychological impact of this cycle was immense. The constant hunger, the monotonous diet, the profound understanding that their sustenance was perpetually limited and uncertain, these eroded mental fortitude, making every task harder, every moment of rest a battle. Hope, a fragile commodity, was constantly challenged by the brutal reality of chronic scarcity. Yet the memory of feasts, however rare, provided a powerful psychological anchor, a glimpse of abundance that fueled their enduring will to toil. Their survival was a testament to meticulous management of resources, the careful preservation of food through salting and drying, and the relentless search for any available sustenance. The cycle of food, hunger, and rare feast was not just an economic reality. It was a deep spiritual rhythm, reflecting their profound dependence on the land and the gods. This persistent struggle, where scarcity defined most days, revealed the harsh realities of early Anglo-Saxon existence. It forged a resilient, resourceful people, constantly navigating the fine line between enough and too little, cherishing the rare moments of plenty. Law without writing. Beyond the gnawing hunger and the rare joy of a communal feast, the early Anglo-Saxon village navigated its complex social interactions not by formal decrees etched on parchment, but by a more ancient, deeply ingrained system. Law without writing was a chilling, omnipresent reality. Justice lived in memory and oath, transforming personal integrity into the ultimate arbiter of truth, and intensifying the constant fear of social condemnation that perpetually bound them in a chilling web of communal control, dictating their very freedom and lives. Imagine the air, thick with the earthy scent of wood smoke, brewing ale, and the subtle tang of human presence, mingling with the pervasive aroma of shared custom. The sounds were no longer the rhythmic crunch of coarse bread. They included the low murmur of hushed accusations, the solemn pronouncements of elders, and the clanging of weapons in a formal oath. Mist drifting over fields at dawn, barely lifting, underscored the hidden rules that shaped every interaction. In early Anglo-Saxon England, before the widespread adoption of written legal codes and centralized royal courts, justice was largely administered at the local level, rooted in tribal custom and oral tradition. Disputes, crimes, and accusations were typically resolved within the village or at the moot, a communal assembly of freemen, presided over by elders or local leaders. Listen to the low murmur of hushed accusations, traveling like wildfire through the communal hall, discussing a neighbor's perceived transgression, a stolen animal, a boundary dispute, an unfulfilled promise. Hear the solemn pronouncements of the elder, his voice grave and measured as he weighed testimony, consulted precedents remembered from other cases, and sought to restore communal harmony. See the disputants, their faces etched with anxiety, their hands perhaps gripping a sacred object as they prepared to swear. Justice lived in memory and oath, the collective memory of the community, the shared understanding of what was right and wrong, of past judgments, formed the basis of their legal system. There were no written records for the common folk to consult, no complex legal texts. Instead, justice relied on the community's shared knowledge of custom, on the testimony of witnesses, and crucially, on the power of the sworn oath. An oath was a sacred binding vow made before God, often by touching a holy relic or a weapon. It was believed that to swear a false oath was to invite divine wrath, bringing ill fortune upon oneself and one's family. The accused, or their oath helpers, respected members of the community who would swear to their good character, would take an oath of innocence, their words carrying immense weight in determining guilt or innocence. The psychological impact was immense. The constant awareness that their reputation, their word, their very freedom could be decided by the strength of an oath or by the collective memory of their community created a pervasive tension. It bred a profound sense of caution, a meticulous adherence to honesty in public, and a deep-seated fear of social condemnation or spiritual damnation. This reliance on oral tradition and sacred oaths ensured a fragile but effective system of justice, deeply intertwined with their spiritual beliefs. It reinforced communal cohesion, emphasizing the importance of honor, trust, and the collective memory in maintaining order. This pervasive fear of social condemnation, shaping every utterance, was a defining aspect of their lives. Law without writing transformed abstract principles into lived reality, binding them to a system where personal integrity, backed by the sacred oath, was the ultimate arbiter of truth and justice. Part 3: Kings, Gods, and Belief. Warrior Kings. From the patchwork of early Anglo-Saxon settlements, forged in conflict and bound by kinship, a profound shift in governance began to define the burgeoning English lands. Warrior kings emerged, not as distant monarchs, but as figures of immediate, formidable authority. Leadership depended on loyalty and gift-giving, transforming martial prowess into a complex web of personal bonds, ensuring stability through allegiance, and underpinning the evolving Anglo-Saxon kingdoms with a fierce, unwavering code of honor and reciprocal obligation. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the earthy scent of wood smoke, damp leather, and the subtle tang of human presence, mingling with the pervasive aroma of simmering stew. The sounds were no longer just the low murmur of communal work. They included the authoritative pronouncements of a king, the rhythmic clink of newly forged weapons, and the boisterous cheers of warriors gathered in a timber hall. Torches flickering on stone walls, their light glinting off polished weapons, illuminated faces etched with respect and unwavering loyalty. Early Anglo-Saxon kingship was intensely personal. A king, sinning, was primarily a successful warlord, whose authority rested on his ability to lead his men in battle, to protect his people, and crucially, to attract and retain the loyalty of his thanes, warriors or nobles, through generosity. This was a direct, reciprocal relationship, a bond forged in shared peril and mutual benefit. Listen to the rhythmic clang of blacksmiths' hammers, working tirelessly in the king's forge, shaping iron into swords, spears, and helmets, the tools of conquest and defense. Hear the boisterous cheers of warriors in the great hall. Hero, their voices raised in song and celebration, recounting tales of past battles and future triumphs, their loyalty openly displayed. See the king himself, enthroned on a simple wooden seat, his face grimly focused, his hand perhaps resting on the hilt of his sword, his gaze sweeping over his assembled thanes. Leadership depended on loyalty and gift-giving. A king's power was not abstract. It was built on the personal allegiance of his warriors. These thanes swore oaths of fealty, pledging their lives to their lord in battle. In return, the king was expected to be a ring giver, distributing treasure, land, and valuable gifts, gold rings, jeweled swords, fine horses, to reward their loyalty and ensure their continued service. This constant cycle of loyalty and gift-giving formed the bedrock of Anglo-Saxon governance. The great timber hall, the hero, was the symbolic heart of this system. Here, the king would hold court, dispense justice, entertain his warriors, and conduct feasting. It was a place of immense social and political significance, where bonds were forged, reputations made, and loyalty publicly reaffirmed. The warmth of the hearth fire, the shared food and drink, the communal storytelling all contributed to strengthening the ties between the king and his thanes. The psychological impact was immense. For the thane, loyalty to his lord was paramount, a sacred duty that often superseded even family ties. To betray one's lord was the ultimate dishonor, leading to social ostracism and profound condemnation. For the king, the constant need to attract and retain warriors, to maintain their loyalty through generosity and success, was a perpetual challenge, intensifying the pressure to prove his worth. This dynamic system of personal bonds, centered on the warrior king, ensured a fragile but effective form of governance in a turbulent age. It allowed for the consolidation of power, the expansion of kingdoms, and the defense of Anglo-Saxon lands against external threats. A powerful declaration of personal allegiance, shaping the destiny of a nascent nation. Warrior kings, embodying leadership dependent on loyalty and gift-giving, were a profound reality in early Anglo-Saxon England. This was a calm, immersive journey through migration, kingdoms, and faith, charting the brutal rise of a new identity. Forever tethered to the quiet echoes of ancient oaths and the deep murmur of ancestral wisdom, in a land slowly being forged. Pagan gods and rituals. Beyond the complex personal bonds of warrior kings and their gift-giving, early Anglo-Saxon life was saturated with a profound spiritual awareness, deeply intertwined with the natural world. Pagan gods and rituals were an omnipresent reality. Woden, Fenrir, and unseen forces shaped fear and hope, transforming every aspect of their existence into a constant negotiation with powerful, often capricious, deities and spirits, dictating their daily actions, their sense of destiny, and their very understanding of the cosmos. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the earthy scent of ancient oak, damp soil, and the subtle tang of human presence, mingling with the pervasive aroma of sacrificial offerings and wood smoke. The sounds were no longer the rhythmic clang of smiths. They included the low murmur of invocations, the rustle of leaves in sacred groves, and the rhythmic beat of drums during solemn festivals. Moonlight over burial mounds, adorned with offerings, illuminated a world imbued with profound spiritual significance. Before the widespread arrival of Christianity, the Anglo-Saxons worshipped a rich, complex pantheon of Germanic gods, inherited from their continental ancestors. Their religion was animistic, polytheistic, and deeply pragmatic, focused on ensuring success in battle, bountiful harvests, protection from malevolent forces, and the well-being of their community. Listen to the low murmur of invocations, whispered by a priest or a respected elder, offering prayers to Woden for victory in battle, to Thunder for fair weather and good crops, Oar to Frigg for fertility and domestic harmony. Hear the rhythmic beat of drums, accompanying solemn dances around sacred trees or stone circles, their sounds echoing through the quiet landscape. See the crude wooden idols, often carved from ancient trees, representing their powerful deities, their forms weathered by time and exposure. Woden, Thunder, and unseen forces shaped fear and hope. Woden, equivalent to Norse Odin, was the chief god, associated with kingship, wisdom, poetry, and war. Thunder, Thor, was the god of thunder, storms, and fertility, invoked for protection and good harvests. Frigg, was the goddess of marriage and domestic life. Beyond these major deities, they believed in a host of lesser spirits: elves, dwarves, land spirits, landwights, and the spirits of their ancestors, all capable of influencing human affairs. Rituals were central to their faith. Sacrifices, often of animals, were made at sacred sites, groves, wells, burial mounds to appease the gods and seek their favor. Feasting, often accompanied by mead and storytelling, was a communal act of worship, reinforcing social bonds and reaffirming their connection to the divine. Omens derived from natural phenomena like bird flight, animal behavior, or weather patterns were meticulously read and interpreted to discern the will of the gods. The psychological impact was immense. The constant awareness of these powerful, often capricious, deities and spirits created a pervasive tension. It bred a profound sense of awe, but also fear of incurring divine wrath through transgression, fear of malevolent spirits, fear of an unpredictable fate. Their lives were a constant negotiation with the unseen world. The cold of winter, the pervasive mud, the constant hunger, these hardships amplified the spiritual burden. Good fortune was a sign of divine favor. Misfortune, a sign of displeasure, intensifying their desperate prayers and their adherence to ancient rituals. Its story, written in every sacred grove, whispered of ancient reverence. Pagan gods and rituals were a profound reality in early Anglo-Saxon England. This was a calm, immersive journey through migration, kingdoms, and faith, charting the brutal rise of a new identity, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of ancient oaths and the deep murmur of ancestral wisdom, in a land saturated with the pervasive power of its pagan deities. Burial and the afterlife. Beyond the daily negotiation with pagan gods and the complex web of ritual, early Anglo-Saxon life held a profound, deeply personal understanding of existence beyond mortality. Burial and the afterlife were inextricably linked. Grave goods told stories of belief, transforming the final rites into a rich, symbolic declaration of the deceased's earthly status and their journey to the spiritual realm, and underpinning a pervasive sense of continuity, ensuring remembrance and alleviating the profound human fear of oblivion. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the earthy scent of freshly dug soil, damp wood, and the subtle tang of human presence, mingling with the pervasive aroma of pine resin and solemn offerings. The sounds were no longer the low murmur of invocations. They included the hushed whispers of mourners, the rhythmic scrape of shovels, and the quiet clink of grave goods being carefully placed. Moonlight over burial mounds, stark against the gray sky, illuminated the profound ritual of final farewells. For the Anglo-Saxons, death was not a definitive end, but a transition to an afterlife, often conceived as a vibrant, if sometimes shadowy, realm. The way a person was buried and what they were buried with reflected their earthly status, their social identity, and their beliefs about the journey awaiting them. Listen to the hushed whispers of mourners, their voices low with grief, yet imbued with solemn reverence, recounting the deeds of the deceased, offering prayers for their safe passage. Hear the rhythmic scrape of shovels as the earth was carefully, yet swiftly, returned to cover the burial chamber. See the grave itself, a simple pit or a more elaborate chamber, its interior meticulously arranged with items deemed essential for the journey. Grave goods told stories of belief. The deceased, typically laid to rest in their finest clothing, would be accompanied by a variety of objects, carefully chosen to reflect their life and their anticipated needs in the afterlife. A warrior would be buried with his sword, shield, and spear, symbols of his prowess and his protection. A woman might be interred with her brooch, beads, tools for weaving or spinning, and perhaps a knife, reflecting her domestic skills and status. These objects were not merely possessions. They were imbued with profound symbolic meaning. They were believed to provide comfort, protection, and status in the afterlife, equipping the deceased for their journey. The richness and quantity of grave goods often indicated the wealth and social standing of the individual. From the elaborate ship burials of kings, like Sutton to the simpler graves of common folk. The burial rituals, often involving feasting and drinking, were crucial for honoring the deceased, for comforting the living, and for ensuring the peaceful transition of the spirit. The erection of burial mounds, barrows over graves, was a common practice, creating visible landmarks that linked the living to their ancestors, reinforcing a sense of lineage and continuity. The psychological impact was immense. The constant awareness of mortality, the swiftness with which death could claim a life, was a pervasive fear. But the rituals of burial and the belief in an afterlife provided profound comfort, offering a framework for understanding and coping with loss, and a hope for continued existence beyond the earthly realm. The cold of winter, the pervasive mud, the constant hunger, these hardships amplified the spiritual burden. The meticulous care of burial rituals, however costly, was seen as an investment in the spiritual well-being of the deceased and the protection of the living. Its story, written in every carefully placed artifact, whispered of eternal journey. Burial and the afterlife were a profound reality in early Anglo-Saxon England. This was a calm, immersive journey through migration, kingdoms, and faith, charting the brutal rise of a new identity, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of ancestral beliefs and the deep murmur of solemn farewells. In a land where the dead remained intimately connected to the living, their stories told in the very earth. The coming of Christianity. Beyond the solemn rituals of pagan burial and the complex pantheon of ancestral gods, a new, transformative spiritual current began to flow into Anglo-Saxon England, challenging ancient beliefs and offering a different path to salvation. The coming of Christianity was not a sudden cataclysm, but a gradual, often subtle process. New faith arrived quietly, not instantly, transforming pagan kingdoms into Christian realms and profoundly reshaping the spiritual, cultural, and political landscape of the island with its message of a single universal God. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the earthy scent of wood smoke, old parchment, and the subtle tang of human presence, now mingling with the sweet, cloying aroma of incense and the crisp scent of new ideas. The sounds were no longer the low murmur of invocations to Woden. They included the solemn chanting of Gregorian plainsong, the gentle murmur of Latin prayers, and the patient voices of missionaries. Wooden halls, once solely for feasting and pagan rites, now heard the whispers of a new, universal God. After their initial arrival in Britain, the Anglo-Saxons had largely reverted to their Germanic pagan religions, pushing the existing Romano-British Christians westward. But from the late 6th century onwards, new waves of missionaries began to arrive, bringing the message of Christ from two distinct directions. Listen to the low, rhythmic chanting of monks, their voices, deep and resonant, echoing through newly built stone churches or temporary wooden chapels, intoning ancient Latin prayers. Hear the patient, gentle voices of missionaries, speaking in simple, earnest Old English, explaining the tenets of the new faith, a single God, a crucified Savior, the promise of eternal life, the concept of sin and redemption. See the humble figures of monks, their robes simple wool, their faces serene, walking among the Anglo-Saxon villagers, offering a message of hope and peace. New faith arrived quietly, not instantly. From the south, Pope Gregory I sent Augustine of Canterbury in 597 CE, initiating the Roman mission to the Kentish court. From the north and west, Irish Celtic missionaries, arriving from places like Iona and Lindisfarne, brought their own vibrant, ascetic, and intellectually rich form of Christianity. These two traditions, though distinct, gradually converged to transform the spiritual landscape. Kings played a crucial role in this conversion, often influenced by their Christian wives, like Bertha of Kent, or by the political advantages of aligning with the powerful Christian continent. Their conversions, often slow and deliberate, influenced their entire kingdoms. They understood that embracing Christianity offered not just spiritual salvation, but also access to new administrative practices, a written legal tradition, and a connection to the wider, more sophisticated intellectual and political networks of Christian Europe. The process was one of syncretism, blending old and new. Pagan sacred sites might be reconsecrated as Christian shrines. Pagan festivals were often repurposed as Christian feast days. The old gods whispered from sacred groves, but Christ gradually claimed the cross, his message slowly permeating the deep-rooted beliefs. The psychological impact was immense. The shift from a polytheistic, warrior-centric religion to a monotheistic, universal faith profoundly altered their worldview, introducing new moral codes, new concepts of time, and a new framework for understanding suffering and salvation. It gradually softened some of the warrior brutality, emphasizing mercy and charity. Its story, written in every newly carved cross, whispered of profound change. The coming of Christianity was a profound epic, a chilling testament to the fragility of ancient beliefs. It was a calm, immersive journey through an island emerging from paganism, charting the migration, kingdoms, and faith that would shape its new identity. Forever tethered to the quiet echoes of new hymns and the deep murmur of spiritual transformation, in a land slowly being forged under the sign of the cross. Monks, books, and memory. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the earthy scent of old parchment, damp stone, and the subtle tongue of human presence, mingling with the sweet, cloying aroma of beeswax from countless candles. The sounds were no longer the solemn chanting of pagan rites. They included the rhythmic scratch of quills, the low murmur of scholars, and the profound, almost eerie silence of a monastic scriptorium. Soft candlelight over ancient parchment, illuminating meticulous script, became the new language of power. Before the widespread arrival of Christianity, Anglo-Saxon society was largely oral. Laws, histories, genealogies, and religious traditions were preserved through memory, recounted by poets, shops, and elders. While this oral culture was rich and vibrant, it was also fragile, susceptible to loss and distortion. Christianity brought with it a profound emphasis on literacy and the written word, tools essential for its dissemination and administration. Listen to the rhythmic scratch of countless quills on precious vellum, a constant, precise sound in the hushed quiet of the scriptorium. As monks meticulously copied ancient texts, hear the low murmur of scholars, their voices hushed and intense, translating Latin works into Old English, debating points of theology, philosophy, and history. See the vast shelves, meticulously organized, laden with hundreds of manuscripts, their bindings rich leather, their pages filled with the intricate beauty of Latin and Old English script. Writing slowly changed power and preservation. Monasteries, established by newly converted kings and queens, became the intellectual bastions of Anglo-Saxon England. Here, monks devoted their lives to copying manuscripts, preserving not only holy scriptures, but also classical Latin texts, historical chronicles like Bede's ecclesiastical history, and crucially, early Anglo-Saxon legal codes and royal charters. This shift from oral to written tradition had immense consequences. Written laws brought a new degree of clarity, consistency, and authority to governance. Royal charters, documenting land grants and legal decisions, provided a more permanent record of power and property. Historical chronicles preserved the memory of kings and kingdoms, legitimizing their rule and shaping future generations' understanding of their past. The production of books was a monumental undertaking. Parchment, made from animal skins, was expensive. Ink was precious. The labor of scribes and illuminators was immense. Yet the commitment to this intellectual flourishing was unwavering, transforming the literate monk into a powerful figure, a custodian of knowledge and a pillar of administrative power. The psychological impact was immense. The written word offered a new form of permanence, a bulwark against the erosion of memory. It fostered a deeper sense of history, a more complex understanding of law, and a more formalized approach to administration, gradually reshaping the very nature of Anglo-Saxon governance. The cold of winter, the pervasive mud, the constant hunger, these hardships amplified the spiritual and intellectual burden. The preservation of books, however costly, was seen as an investment in the spiritual well-being of the kingdom and its enduring legacy. Its story, written in every meticulously copied word, whispered of profound change. Monks, books, and memory were a profound reality in early Anglo-Saxon England. This was a calm, immersive journey through migration, kingdoms, and faith, charting the brutal rise of a new identity, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of ancient texts and the deep murmur of spiritual transformation, in a land slowly being forged under the enduring power of the written word. Part 4: England under pressure. Rival kingdoms. Beyond the burgeoning monasteries and the quiet power of the written word, early Anglo-Saxon England was a land perpetually in flux, its political landscape a dynamic, often violent, tapestry of competing ambitions. Rival kingdoms were an omnipresent reality. Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria competed endlessly, transforming territorial disputes into relentless warfare, and intensifying the constant fear of conquest that perpetually bound them in a chilling web of shifting alliances, dictating their very survival and shaping the brutal rise and fall of their fragile dominions. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the earthy scent of wood smoke, distant battle smoke, and the subtle tang of human ambition. The sounds were no longer the solemn chanting of monks. They included the rhythmic beat of royal drums, the authoritative pronouncements of emerging kings, and the terrifying clash of spear on shield. Horsetail banners, now adorned with royal emblems, fluttered defiantly against a bruised gray sky, marking the shifting boundaries of fiercely contested lands. After the initial waves of Anglo-Saxon settlement and the subsequent conflicts with the Britons, the myriad small tribal groups and petty chieftaincies gradually consolidated into larger, more stable political entities. This process, driven by successful warfare, strategic alliances, and the charismatic leadership of powerful warlords, led to the formation of the prominent kingdoms of the Heptarchy. Listen to the rhythmic beat of royal drums, a deep, resonant throb that vibrated through the earth, marking the solemn declaration of a new king, a new boundary. Hear the authoritative pronouncements of emerging rulers, their voices carrying the weight of nascent power, asserting their dominion over newly conquered territories. See the evolving political map of Britain, a fluid, ever-changing tapestry of control as Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria began to assert their dominance. Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria competed endlessly. These three kingdoms in particular were the dominant powers, constantly vying for hegemony over Anglo-Saxon England. Wessex in the southwest, with its strong royal line and strategic control of the southern coast. Mercia, a formidable power in the Midlands, strategically located and often economically vibrant. Northumbria, a cultural and intellectual powerhouse in the north, stretching from the Humber to the Forth. Their stories were woven into the very landscape, their names marking the regions they controlled. Their competition was relentless, often erupting into brutal warfare. Kings led their thanes, warriors, into battle, seeking glory, land, and tribute. Alliances were forged and broken with bewildering frequency. Rivalries simmered, and the quest for Bretwalda, an overlordship over other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, became a driving ambition for many powerful rulers. The warfare was fierce and devastating. Battles were often localized, brutal affairs, fought with spear, sword, and axe. Villages were burned, fields laid waste, populations displaced or enslaved. The strategic importance of river crossings, fortified strongholds, and fertile lands fueled an almost constant state of conflict. The psychological impact was immense. The constant awareness of political instability, the ever-present threat of conquest, and the brutal realities of power created a pervasive tension. It bred a profound sense of insecurity, a quiet despair that shaped every aspiration, every interaction. Hope, a fragile commodity, was constantly challenged by the brutal reality of their warring existence. This era of intense inter-kingdom rivalry shaped the very destiny of England, forging a resilient, ambitious people, constantly grappling with the challenges of consolidating power and defending their burgeoning realms. Its story, written in every shifting border, whispered of ceaseless ambition. Rival kingdoms was a profound reality in early Anglo-Saxon England, a chilling reminder why surviving a single day was unlikely. It was a calm, immersive journey through a land under constant pressure, charting the brutal rise of its political identity, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of battle cries and the deep murmur of ancestral wisdom, in a land slowly being forged by internal conflict. Violence as normality was a chilling, omnipresent reality. Raids, feuds, and small wars shaped borders, transforming sporadic conflict into a pervasive, intimate threat, and intensifying the constant fear of physical harm that perpetually bound them in a chilling web of insecurity, dictating their very survival and leaving an indelible mark on their understanding of order and justice. The sounds were no longer the rhythmic beat of royal drums. They included the sudden shouts of raiding parties, the clash of spear on shield, the desperate cries of victims, and the mournful wails of women. Mist drifting over fields at dawn, now often illuminated by the glow of burning villages, obscured individual horrors in a haze of brutal, indiscriminate violence. Early Anglo-Saxon England was a profoundly militarized society. While kings led large armies in grand campaigns, much of the violence was localized, endemic, and often deeply personal. Raids, feuds, and small wars were not isolated incidents. They were a constant underlying feature of life, shaping the interactions between villages, between kin groups, and between petty chieftains. Listen to the sudden shouts of a raiding party, their guttural Old English cries echoing through the early morning mist, a terrifying harbinger of swift, brutal violence. Hear the clash of spear on shield, the thud of axe on wood, the desperate cries of men defending their homes. See the crude, round wooden shields, painted with tribal designs, meeting the flashing blades of attackers. A brutal dance of life and death unfolding in familiar surroundings. Raids, feuds, and small wars shaped borders. Raids were common. A quick, brutal assault on a neighboring village or a smaller settlement, designed to plunder livestock, seize captives for slavery, or simply to assert dominance. These raids struck without warning, leaving behind burned homes, dead bodies, and profound terror. Feuds, often long-running and bloody, erupted between kin groups or families over insults, disputes, or past killings. These cycles of vengeance could escalate swiftly, leading to brutal retribution that often involved entire families or villages, perpetuating a constant state of low-level violence. Small wars, localized conflicts between petty chieftains or aspiring kings, constantly reshaped local borders, determining who controlled fertile lands, vital river crossings, or valuable resources. These conflicts, though smaller in scale than royal campaigns, were equally brutal for the common peasant caught in their path. The psychological impact was immense. The constant awareness of this pervasive violence, the knowledge that danger could erupt at any moment, from any direction, transformed every interaction into a potential confrontation. It bred a profound sense of insecurity, a quiet despair that shaped every decision, every interaction. Personal safety was a matter of constant vigilance, of belonging to a strong kin group, of being under the protection of a powerful and present lord. The cold of winter, the pervasive mud, the constant hunger, these hardships amplified the physical toll, making every attack more lethal, every injury more devastating. The memory of past raids, of loved ones lost, was deeply ingrained, feeding the pervasive fear. This constant violence shaped the very fabric of Anglo-Saxon society, dictating the need for warrior kings, for strong kin groups, and for a pervasive culture of defense. Its story, written in every clash of steel, whispered of constant peril. Violence as normality was a profound reality in early Anglo-Saxon England, a chilling reminder why surviving a single day was unlikely. It was a calm, immersive journey through a land under constant pressure, charting the brutal rise of its political identity, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of battle cries and the deep murmur of constant, unromanticized conflict in a land where peace was fleeting and danger ever present. Disease and short lives were a chilling, omnipresent reality. Survival past youth was never guaranteed, transforming individual existence into a precarious gamble with mortality, intensifying the constant fear of illness, and perpetually binding them in a chilling web of biological vulnerability, where death was an intimate, constant companion. The sounds were no longer the shouts of raiding parties. They included the insistent, racking coughs, the low moans of fever, the quiet whimpers of pain, and the anxious murmurs of worried families. Mist drifting over fields at dawn, barely lifting, revealed gaunt faces, etched with weariness and profound apprehension. For the vast majority of early Anglo-Saxons, good health was a rare and fleeting luxury. Their lives were plagued by a constant barrage of ailments, both chronic and acute, born of their harsh living conditions, poor nutrition, lack of hygiene, and the complete absence of scientific understanding of disease. There was no concept of microbes, of bacteria, of viruses. Listen to the incessant, hacking coughs echoing through the hut, their sound raw and insistent, making breath a painful struggle for a feverish child or a weakened adult. Hear the low moans of feverish bodies, tossing restlessly on their straw beds, their skin slick with sweat, yet shivering uncontrollably. See the flushed faces, the dull, unfocused eyes, the small, frail bodies fighting a desperate, silent battle against an invisible enemy, their fragile lives hanging in the balance. Survival past youth was never guaranteed. Infant and child mortality rates were devastatingly high, often claiming half of all children before they reached adulthood. Those who did survive childhood faced a relentless barrage of hardships, chronic malnutrition, debilitating illnesses, dangerous labor, and constant exposure to the elements that wore down the body and shortened lives. Life expectancy for an adult was often in their 30s or 40s, with few living past 50. Disease spread easily in crowded homes, with poor ventilation and close proximity to animals. Water sources, often communal rivers or wells, were perpetually vulnerable to contamination. Lack of effective medicine meant that even common ailments like influenza, dysentery, or smallpox could quickly become lethal, claiming lives with merciless efficiency. The psychological impact was immense. The constant awareness of illness, the knowledge that sickness could strike at any moment, swiftly claiming a loved one without warning or explanation, was a crushing burden. It amplified the sense of profound helplessness, deepening the despair, transforming the fragile sanctuary of the cottage into a crucible of suffering and fear. The bed, far from being a guarantee of safety, often became a place of profound struggle, where life slowly ebbed away. Your family, huddled close, shared this grim reality. Their own illnesses, their persistent coughs, their knowledge of neighbors succumbing to mysterious fevers, were a shared burden, an unspoken understanding of their common lot. Hunger and harsh winters. The sounds were no longer the low moans of the sick. They included the mournful lowing of starving cattle, the desperate cries of hungry children, and the chilling whisper of wind through withered crops. Mist drifting over fields at dawn, revealing a devastating tableau of blighted plants or immense snowdrifts, grim testaments to nature's indifference. For the Anglo-Saxon peasant, life was inextricably bound to the land and its cycles. Their agrarian existence was utterly dependent on the benevolent cooperation of the weather. A single season of abnormal conditions, too much rain, too little sun, an unseasonal frost, a devastating drought could spell catastrophe, unraveling months of arduous labor and pushing entire communities to the brink of starvation. Listen to the mournful lowing of cattle, their ribs showing starkly beneath their hides, their eyes dull with thirst and hunger, their voices echoing the despair of a failed season. Hear the chilling whisper of wind through withered crops, a desolate sound that spoke of vanished bounty. See the vast, open fields, once a promise of sustenance, now a devastating tableau of brown and brittle plants, or an endless expanse of snow, its productivity utterly lost. Nature decided who lived through the year. One bad harvest, caused by disease, pests, or unfavorable weather, meant that the precious grain for the coming year was lost. This directly led to famine, a slow, agonizing death that claimed thousands. A harsh winter with extreme cold and prolonged snow could freeze rivers, starve livestock, and make travel impossible, leading to widespread hypothermia and starvation. A wet spring could rot newly sown seeds, delay planting, and promote disease, setting the stage for another failed harvest. These were not merely inconveniences. They were existential threats. Entire families could be wiped out, their lives extinguished, their homes abandoned. The delicate balance of their existence, perpetually on the edge, could be shattered by a single, unpredictable turn of the season, leaving no recourse. The psychological impact was immense. A constant awareness of this profound vulnerability, the knowledge that their entire future hinged on the unpredictable whims of nature, eroded mental fortitude. It bred a profound sense of fatalism, a quiet despair that shaped every decision, every interaction. Hope, a fragile commodity, was constantly challenged by the brutal reality of an indifferent world. The cold, the pervasive mud, the constant hunger. These hardships amplified the physical toll, making their bodies even more susceptible to the ravages of famine and disease that followed a poor season. The fragility of peace. The sounds were no longer the low moans of the hungry. They included the hushed murmurs of villagers discussing rumors of war, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the unsettling quiet that sometimes fell over a seemingly peaceful village. Mist drifting over fields at dawn, barely lifting, revealed a landscape always poised for conflict. Early Anglo-Saxon England was a deeply militarized and fragmented society. While periods of relative peace certainly occurred, often through treaties, marriage alliances, or the temporary dominance of a powerful king, these moments of stability were always precarious. Rivalries between kingdoms, territorial disputes, and the constant threat of external raids from Britons, Picts, or later Vikings ensured that lasting peace was an elusive dream. Listen to the low murmur of hushed conversations, their tones imbued with a subtle anxiety, discussing rumors of a lord mobilizing his fyrd, militia, or news of a border skirmish with a neighboring kingdom. Hear the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, shaping iron not just for tools, but for swords and spearheads, its rhythm a constant reminder of the ever-present need for defense. See the faces of villagers, their expressions cautious, their eyes scanning the horizon, perpetually alert for signs of impending trouble. Stability never lasted long. A newly drawn border, a treaty sealed with oaths, a period of royal alliance. These were temporary measures, constantly threatened by the ambition of powerful kings, the shifting loyalties of thanes, and the relentless pressure of external forces. What might seem like a period of calm was often just a tense interlude, a moment of anxious waiting before the next inevitable conflict erupted. The warfare was fierce and devastating. Raids, feuds, and small wars constantly reshaped local borders, determining who controlled fertile lands, vital river crossings, or valuable resources. Villages were burned, fields laid waste, populations displaced or enslaved. The common peasant, caught in the path of these conflicts, suffered immensely, their lives and livelihoods shattered by the arbitrary violence. The psychological impact was immense. The constant awareness of this pervasive threat, the knowledge that danger could erupt at any moment, from any direction, transformed every interaction into a potential confrontation. It bred a profound sense of insecurity, a quiet despair that shaped every decision, every interaction. Personal safety was a matter of constant vigilance, of belonging to a strong kin group, of being under the protection of a powerful and present lord. The cold of winter, the pervasive mud, a constant hunger. These hardships amplified the physical toll, making every attack more lethal, every injury more devastating. The memory of past raids, of loved ones lost, was deeply ingrained, feeding the pervasive fear. Its story, written in every broken treaty, whispered of ceaseless conflict. The fragility of peace was a profound reality in early Anglo-Saxon England, a chilling reminder why surviving a single day was unlikely. It was a calm, immersive journey through a land under constant pressure, charting the brutal rise of its political identity. Forever tethered to the quiet echoes of battle cries and the deep murmur of constant, unromanticized conflict, in a land where true stability was a fleeting illusion, and danger ever present. Part 5. The Viking Age. First sight of the longships. The peace of Anglo-Saxon England, forged in Alfred's defiance and Athelstan's unity, was a fragile thing. For decades, the consolidation of kingdoms and the flourishing of learning had drawn the island away from the memory of earlier continental threats. Then, without warning, the ancient terror returned, but with a new, sharper edge. Fear arrived from the sea, transforming the tranquil coastal waters into a harbinger of chaos as the longships, silent and deadly, sliced through the morning mist, marking the chilling dawn of the Viking Age and a profound, terrifying shift in England's destiny. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the pervasive scent of salt spray, wet wood, and the subtle tang of human apprehension, mingling with the acrid aroma of distant smoke. The sounds were no longer the peaceful lapping of waves on a quiet shore. They included the rhythmic splash of unseen oars, the guttural shouts of foreign warriors, and the terrifying shriek of wind through taut rigging. Moonlight, or the first bruised light of dawn, glimmering on dark waves, now reflected off terrifying carved dragon heads, illuminated a world utterly unprepared. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, particularly those along the eastern and northern coasts, had grown accustomed to a degree of maritime security. Their monasteries, rich in gold and silver, situated in remote, undefended locations like Lindisfarne, were symbols of spiritual devotion, not vulnerability. This made them irresistible targets for the ambitious, desperate seafarers of Scandinavia. Listen to the rhythmic splash of unseen oars, growing steadily louder, cutting through the early morning mist with chilling precision. Hear the guttural shouts of foreign warriors, their voices harsh and unsettling, echoing across the quiet estuaries, proclaiming their aggressive intent. See the long, low silhouettes of the dragon ships, lying skip, their distinctive prows carved into fearsome beasts' dragons, serpents emerging from the dense sea fog, their single square sails, if hoisted, catching the first hesitant light of day. Fear arrived from the sea without warning. The Viking longships were masterpieces of naval engineering, swift and shallow-drafted, propelled by both sail and oar. They could traverse vast open oceans and then navigate shallow rivers, penetrating deep inland, striking seemingly at will. Their arrival was almost always sudden, brutal, and without mercy, catching communities utterly by surprise. The raid on Lindisfarne Monastery in 793 CE, often considered the beginning of the Viking Age in England, sent shockwaves across Christian Europe. Monks were slaughtered, precious treasures plundered, and holy relics desecrated. This was not a conventional army seeking land. It was a swift, brutal assault on the very heart of Anglo-Saxon Christian culture and wealth. The psychological impact was immense. The Vikings were unlike any enemy the Anglo-Saxons had faced before. They were swift, pagan, and seemingly fearless, their ferocity amplified by their alien culture and their brutal efficiency. The raids brought not just physical destruction and death, but a profound, existential terror that permeated every coastal community, shattering any illusion of security. The very landscape of England began to change as communities built new fortifications, retreated inland, or lived in constant apprehension. The era of monastic flourishing gave way to an age of fear and desperate defense, as the shadow of the dragon ships lengthened across the land. The longships, symbols of encroaching terror, redefined in age. First sight of the longships was a profound, chilling reality in early Anglo-Saxon England, a terrifying marker of the Viking Age. It was a calm, immersive journey through an island emerging from a hard-won peace, charting the brutal return of conflict, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of foreign tongues and the deep murmur of ancestral dread, in a land transformed by the relentless arrival of the sea raiders. Monasteries under attack. As the terrifying silhouettes of dragon ships emerged from the northern mists, bringing with them a chilling new era of fear, the Viking onslaught quickly focused on the most vulnerable and tempting targets. Monasteries under attack became a widespread, horrifying reality. Lindisfarne, Jarrow, Iona, beacons of learning and piety, now burning, transforming sacred sanctuaries into symbols of utter devastation, and profoundly shattering the spiritual, intellectual, and economic foundations of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. The sounds were no longer the solemn chanting of monks. They included the terrifying roar of flames, the crackle and collapse of burning buildings, the desperate screams of the innocent, and the triumphant, guttural shouts of Viking raiders. Moonlight, or the first pale light of dawn, glimmering on dark waves, now reflected a horrifying, orange glow emanating from the burning ruins, a grim beacon across the water. Anglo-Saxon monasteries were not merely places of prayer. They were vital centers of learning, culture, and immense wealth. They housed vast libraries of precious manuscripts, elaborate treasures of gold and silver, donated by pious kings and nobles, and functioned as economic hubs, supporting extensive networks of trade and charitable works. Their often remote coastal locations, chosen for contemplative isolation, inadvertently made them highly visible and undefended targets for swift, brutal Viking assaults. Listen to the terrifying roar of flames, a living, breathing beast consuming everything in its path, devouring ancient oak, and meticulously carved altars. Hear the crackle and collapse of burning timber, the splintering of sacred objects, the shattering of precious stained glass. If present, see the columns of black smoke rising against the bruised gray sky, illuminated by the orange glow of the unstoppable inferno. A terrifying beacon of raw, destructive power, visible for miles across the land and sea. Lindisfarne, Jarrow, Iona, beacons of learning now burning. The raid on Lindisfarne in 793 CE was a monumental shock, sending tremors across Christian Europe. This was followed by successive brutal attacks on other prominent monasteries. Jarrow, where the Venerable Bede had written his great history. Iona, a cradle of Celtic Christianity. Monkwearmouth, Lastingham, and countless others. These were not just attacks on buildings. They were assaults on the very intellectual and spiritual heart of Anglo-Saxon England, deliberate acts of sacrilege and plunder. Monks were slaughtered, precious relics desecrated, and vast treasures of gold, silver, and intricate artworks plundered. The invaluable libraries, filled with meticulously copied manuscripts, holy scriptures, classical texts, historical chronicles, were either deliberately burned or scattered to the winds, their knowledge and wisdom lost forever. A profound cultural catastrophe. The psychological impact was immense. The destruction of these sacred sites was seen as a profound act of divine displeasure, a manifestation of God's wrath, and a terrifying symbol of the utter vulnerability of their Christian faith to the pagan fury of the Vikings. It eroded hope, amplified despair, and intensified the sense of profound helplessness, forcing a re-evaluation of their place in God's plan. The era of monastic flourishing, the golden age of Northumbria, came to a brutal, abrupt end. A focus shifted from learning and art to defense and survival. The very landscape of England began to change as communities built new fortifications, retreated inland, or lived in constant apprehension, abandoning the coasts. The burning of monasteries, once vibrant centers of light, sent a chilling message. Monasteries under attack transformed sacred sanctuaries into symbols of utter devastation, charting the brutal beginning of the Viking storm, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of burning knowledge and the profound silence of a vast, unforgiving ocean, waiting for new, terrifying footsteps to fill its empty spaces, often with bloodshed and profound spiritual destruction, marking a dark chapter for a nascent nation. Living with invasion. As the devastating raids on monasteries subsided and the scale of the Viking threat transformed from episodic violence to sustained presence, Anglo-Saxon England faced a profound, agonizing choice: perpetual war or reluctant coexistence. Living with invasion became a grim, pervasive reality. Raids turned into settlement, transforming once hostile territories into new homes, and fundamentally reshaping the social, economic, and cultural landscape of the island, with its enduring echoes of Norse influence and the quiet struggle for coexistence. Moonlight glimmering on dark waves, now reflecting the sails of Viking merchant ships, illuminated a world fundamentally changed by their presence. The relentless nature of Viking attacks, particularly from the great heathen army, had pushed Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to their breaking point. After decades of brutal warfare, a pragmatic, if painful, resolution began to emerge. The Vikings, having exhausted the immediate plunder, sought not just wealth, but land, fertile land to settle, to farm, to build new lives. Listen to the low murmur of uneasy conversations between Anglo-Saxon and Norse farmers. Their voices a blend of suspicion and reluctant acceptance, discussing communal land, shared resources, local disputes. Hear the rhythmic clang of blacksmiths' hammers, shaping iron not just for weapons, but for plows and tools, marking the shift from raiding to settlement. See the long, low silhouettes of Viking longhouses, their timber frames rising alongside Anglo-Saxon dwellings, a visible testament to new communities. Raids turned into settlement. The Danelaw, formally established by treaty with Alfred the Great, was the most significant manifestation of this transformation. Vast regions of eastern England, from East Anglia to Northumbria, came under the political and legal control of the Danes. Viking warriors, having laid down their arms, became farmers, merchants, and landowners, building new communities and integrating, however uneasily, with the existing Anglo-Saxon population. This period saw a profound cultural blending. Viking customs, legal practices, and language became deeply embedded in the Danelaw. Place names often reflected Norse origins, ending in by, Thorpe, Thwaite, marking their dominion. Legal systems incorporated elements of Danish law, creating a hybrid form of justice. Intermarriage occurred, forging new bonds between the formerly warring peoples, slowly blurring the lines of distinct identity. The psychological impact was immense. For the Anglo-Saxons, it was a period of profound adaptation. While there was resentment over lost territory and subjugation, there was also the pragmatic necessity of coexistence. For the Vikings, it was the culmination of generations of migration and conquest, a new home secured through fierce determination, transforming their warrior identity into that of settlers and farmers. This new reality of living with invasion reshaped the very identity of England, forging a hybrid society that would, centuries later, become the bedrock of a unified English nation. Alfred and survival. Amidst the relentless Viking storm, which had ravaged Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and threatened to extinguish the very concept of an English identity, a single, indomitable spirit rose from the crucible of near defeat. Alfred and survival became synonymous. Learning, law, and resistance preserved a kingdom, transforming despair into a powerful, enduring blueprint for a unified nation, and shaping the very destiny of the island with strategic genius, intellectual revitalization, and unwavering resolve. Alfred, King of Wessex, had faced the Viking onslaught at its fiercest. He had suffered devastating defeats, been forced to flee into hiding in the remote marshes of Athelney, and seen his kingdom repeatedly ravaged. Yet, unlike other Anglo-Saxon rulers who had capitulated or been eliminated, Alfred refused to yield. His time in hiding was not just a period of survival, but of profound contemplation, a crucible where his vision for a new England was forged. Listen to the low murmur of scholars in newly established scriptoria, diligently copying ancient texts, revitalizing learning in a kingdom recovering from devastation. Hear the rhythmic tap of chisels on stone, shaping new fortifications for burrs, symbols of a renewed defensive strategy. See Alfred himself, often portrayed not as a purely martial figure, but as a king deeply engaged in administration, law, and intellectual pursuits, his face etched with wisdom and quiet determination. Learning, law, and resistance preserved a kingdom. Alfred understood that military resistance alone was insufficient for long-term survival. True, lasting strength required a unified people, bound not just by a common enemy, but by shared laws, a robust intellectual culture, and a centralized administration. He initiated a series of radical reforms across these three pillars. His military innovations included reorganizing his army and creating a system of fortified boroughs, strategic towns designed for defense and as safe havens for the population and their markets. This provided a crucial infrastructure for resistance, allowing him to gradually push back against Viking control. In terms of learning, he commissioned the translation of key Latin texts into Old English, fostering a shared Anglo-Saxon literary culture and making essential knowledge more accessible. He invited scholars from across Europe, revitalizing monasteries and establishing schools, nurturing the intellectual heart of his kingdom. And his reforms in law and governance provided stability. He issued new law codes, drawing upon Anglo-Saxon traditions, ensuring a degree of justice and order that strengthened the loyalty of his subjects. His rule became a beacon of effective, centralized administration, providing a stark contrast to the fragmented territories of the Danelaw. The psychological impact was immense. For a people battered by decades of invasion, Alfred's leadership and his vision offered a powerful new sense of identity, a collective purpose, a hope for a future where peace and order might eventually prevail. He became not just a king, but a legendary symbol of Anglo-Saxon resistance and enduring English spirit. His stand against overwhelming odds laid the foundations for a future unified English kingdom, truly deserving of the name England, land of the Angles. This transformation was the ultimate testament to his wisdom and his unwavering will. Alfred's wisdom, courage, and commitment to his people saved the kingdom. Alfred and Survival was a profound, epic-defining chapter in Anglo-Saxon history. It was a calm, immersive journey through an island emerging from constant siege, charting the migration, kingdoms, and faith that would shape its new identity, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of his strategic genius and the profound silence of a vast, forgiving land now bearing the indelible mark of a nation reborn, forged in the crucible of his unwavering will. A blended England. After the relentless Viking storm, which had pushed Anglo-Saxon England to the brink of collapse, and following the remarkable stand of King Alfred the Great, the tumultuous era finally settled into a period of uneasy yet profound coexistence. A blended England emerged as a pervasive, enduring reality. Anglo-Saxon and Viking lives intertwined, transforming erstwhile enemies into neighbors, and profoundly reshaping the social, economic, and cultural landscape of the island with its enduring echoes of Norse influence and the quiet struggle for a shared future. Moonlight glimmering on dark waves, now reflecting the sails of Norse merchant ships, illuminated a world fundamentally changed by their renewed presence. Alfred's victory at Edington and the subsequent Treaty of Wedmore in 878 CE did not expel all Vikings from England. Instead, it formally established the Danelaw, a vast region of eastern England, stretching from the Thames to Northumbria, which came under the political and legal control of the Danes. This was a pragmatic, if often painful, compromise, reluctantly accepting the reality of Viking settlement. Listen to the low murmur of uneasy coexistence, a constant undercurrent in the newly divided lands. Hear the guttural sounds of Old Norse, blending with the Old English, creating a unique linguistic tapestry in the Danelaw. See the new boundaries, often marked by rivers or ancient roads, delineating Anglo-Saxon territory from Viking-controlled lands, their lines etched onto the very map of England. Anglo-Saxon and Viking lives intertwined. Over decades, Viking warriors, having laid down their arms, transformed into farmers, merchants, and landowners, building new communities and integrating, however uneasily, with the existing Anglo-Saxon population. This period saw a profound cultural blending that permeated every aspect of daily life. Viking customs and legal practices became deeply embedded in the Danelaw. Place names often reflected Norse origins, ending in by Thorp, Thwaite, marking their dominion. Legal systems incorporated elements of Danish law, creating a hybrid form of justice. Intermarriage occurred, forging new bonds between the formerly warring peoples, slowly blurring the lines of distinct identity, creating a truly blended population. The psychological impact was immense. For the Anglo-Saxons, it was a period of profound adaptation. While there was resentment over lost territory and subjugation, there was also the pragmatic necessity of coexistence. For the Vikings, it was the culmination of generations of migration and conquest, a new home secured through fierce determination, transforming their warrior identity into that of settlers and farmers. This new reality of living side by side, sharing the land, eventually softened animosities. Trade flourished between the two zones, and over time, a shared sense of regional identity began to emerge, laying the groundwork for a future unified kingdom that would incorporate these diverse influences. A new English identity, resilient and adaptive, slowly emerged. A blended England was a profound epic, a chilling testament to the fluidity of human settlement. It was a calm, immersive journey through an island emerging from constant siege, charting the migration, kingdoms, and faith that would shape its new identity, forever tethered to the quiet echoes of new languages and the profound silence of a vast, forgiving land, now bearing the indelible mark of Norse presence as a new hybrid nation slowly coalesced. Part 6. The Quiet End, Power Under the Crown. As the Viking storm gradually subsided, leaving behind a blended England where Norse and Anglo-Saxon lives intertwined, the power of the monarchy began its slow, inexorable consolidation. Power under the crown became a pervasive, chilling reality. Kingship grew heavier, more bureaucratic, transforming the personal authority of warrior chieftains into an increasingly centralized and formal system of governance, and underpinning the burgeoning English state with a powerful, unyielding administrative structure that dictated every aspect of justice, taxation, and military command. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the earthy scent of parchment, old stone, and the subtle tang of human presence, mingling with the sweet aroma of beeswax from countless candles. The sounds were no longer the clash of invading armies. They included the low murmur of scribes, the rhythmic tap of quills, and the solemn pronouncements of royal officials. Wooden halls, now grander and more refined, echoed with the new language of centralized power. After the unifying reigns of Alfred the Great and his successors, the English monarchy, based in Wessex, systematically expanded its authority over the entire island, absorbing the Danelaw and establishing undisputed dominion. This required a profound transformation in the nature of kingship, shifting from a primarily military role to a more administrative and legal one. Listen to the low murmur of scribes, diligently copying royal charters, legal codes, and administrative records in dimly lit monastic scriptoria. Hear the rhythmic tap of countless quills on precious vellum, as the vast bureaucracy of the English crown slowly took shape. See the king himself, no longer just a warrior, but a lawmaker, a patron of the church, and the supreme administrator of his realm, his face etched with the weight of immense responsibility. Kingship grew heavier, more bureaucratic. The Anglo-Saxon kings, particularly from Athelstan onwards, developed a sophisticated system of governance. They issued extensive written law codes, covering everything from land tenure to criminal justice. They established a national system of taxation, efficiently collecting revenues to fund armies and administration. Royal charters, meticulously written and sealed, formalized land ownership and privileges. The Witnagemot, the traditional council of wise men, evolved into a more formal body advising the king. Royal officials, like the aldermen, later earls, and sheriffs, administered justice and collected taxes in the shires, ensuring the king's writ ran across the entire kingdom. The minting of coinage, a royal prerogative, became centralized and standardized, facilitating trade and demonstrating the king's economic power. This growing bureaucracy allowed for unprecedented levels of centralized control and administrative efficiency. It transformed a collection of disparate kingdoms into a cohesive, unified nation, capable of defending its borders, maintaining internal order, and projecting its authority both at home and abroad. The psychological impact was immense. For the populace, the presence of a strong, centralized monarchy offered a greater sense of security and justice, however harsh. For the kings, the burden of their extensive duties was profound, requiring immense administrative skill and unwavering resolve. This transformation was the ultimate legacy of the Anglo-Saxon kings, laying the administrative and legal foundations for a powerful, unified English state. England before 1066. As the Anglo-Saxon monarchy consolidated its power, transforming kingship into a heavy, bureaucratic mantle, England entered a rare, prolonged period of peace and stability. England before 1066 was a prosperous, complex realm, a stable world that felt permanent, transforming centuries of conflict into a flourishing, sophisticated society, underpinning its cultural richness with robust governance, and creating a unique identity, utterly unaware of the seismic change gathering across the channel. The sounds were no longer the distant clash of swords. They included the low murmur of bustling markets, the rhythmic clang of smiths, and the cheerful shouts of children playing in village squares. Stone churches, sturdy and proud, echoed with the solemn chants of Latin, while Old English, vibrant and alive, filled homes and fields. By the mid-11th century, after the turbulent period of Viking incursions and the subsequent reign of Canute the Great, England, under kings like Edward the Confessor, had achieved a remarkable degree of internal stability and prosperity. It was one of the most organized and wealthiest kingdoms in Western Europe, with a sophisticated administrative system, a thriving economy, and a rich cultural heritage. Listen to the low murmur of bustling markets. There sounds a cacophony of vendors, hagglers, and citizens engaged in lively commerce. Hear the rhythmic clang of blacksmiths' hammers, shaping iron for tools and plowshares, their rhythm a testament to ceaseless industry. See the vast, fertile fields, meticulously cultivated, stretching across the landscape, producing abundant grain and supporting a thriving agricultural economy. A stable world that felt permanent. The English monetary system, based on the silver penny, was remarkably stable and well regulated, facilitating extensive trade both domestically and with continental Europe. Towns were growing, their markets vibrant, their populations expanding. A complex system of shires and hundreds, administered by royal officials, ensured law and order across the kingdom. The church in England was deeply established, with magnificent cathedrals and prosperous monasteries serving as centers of spiritual life, learning, and cultural production. Old English, in its late form, was a vibrant, living language, used for both administrative records and a rich body of literature, including poetry, chronicles, and religious texts. The king, Edward the Confessor, though pious and somewhat detached, ruled over a largely peaceful and prosperous realm. His court, while increasingly influenced by Norman customs due to his long exile, remained fundamentally Anglo-Saxon in its composition and character. The psychological impact was immense. Generations had known relative peace, prosperity, and a stable, well-ordered society. There was a profound sense of continuity, a belief that their way of life, their Anglo-Saxon identity, their kingdom, was enduring, permanent, destined to continue indefinitely. This stable world, unaware of the profound changes gathering across the Channel, was a testament to centuries of hard-won progress. England, before 1066, revealed a sophisticated, prosperous nation, deeply rooted in its Anglo-Saxon heritage, its future seemingly secure. The Norman threat, as Anglo-Saxon England, prosperous and seemingly permanent, enjoyed a fragile peace under Edward the Confessor. A dark, ambitious shadow began to lengthen from across the English Channel. The Norman threat was a pervasive, insidious force. Change gathered across the Channel, driven by the fierce ambition of a powerful duke, transforming the quiet stability of England into a precarious vulnerability, and foreshadowing the profound, brutal end of an ancient age. Moonlight glimmering on dark waves, now reflecting the sails of a formidable invasion fleet, illuminated a world fundamentally poised for conflict. William, Duke of Normandy, a formidable and ruthless ruler, was a direct descendant of Viking settlers in France. He had consolidated his own duchy through cunning diplomacy and brutal military force, creating a powerful, centralized state. He had a plausible, though contested, claim to the English throne, based on an alleged promise from Edward the Confessor and an oath supposedly made by Harold Godwinson. Listen to the rhythmic clang of smiths' hammers, working tirelessly in Norman forges, shaping immense quantities of iron into mail, helmets, and swords, the tools of a vast, impending conquest. Hear the hushed whispers of political intrigue in William's court, his advisors discussing strategy, logistics, and the legitimacy of his claim. See the vast forests of Normandy, slowly being felled, their timber transformed into thousands of ship hulls, preparing for an unprecedented cross-channel invasion. Change gathered across the channel. William's ambition was immense, to claim the wealthy English crown. He meticulously gathered intelligence on England's defenses, cultivated support from the papacy, and assembled a formidable invasion force, a vast army of Norman, Breton, and Flemish knights, archers and infantry, along with an immense fleet of transport ships. This was not a mere raid. It was a full-scale conquest, meticulously planned and ruthlessly executed. The English, though prosperous, were increasingly aware of the gathering storm. Harold Godwinson, the most powerful English earl and later king, knew of William's claim and the threat he posed. The political landscape was fraught with tension, with powerful English earls often at odds, inadvertently weakening the kingdom's collective response. The psychological impact was immense. The knowledge of William's preparations, the whispers of his ambition, created a pervasive sense of apprehension across England. The Channel, once a protective barrier, now felt like a conduit for invasion. The peace, so hard-won and so long enjoyed, felt profoundly fragile, perpetually overshadowed by the distant clang of Norman preparations. This gathering threat was the ultimate external pressure, destined to shatter the Anglo-Saxon world and to integrate England irrevocably into a wider continental European sphere. Edward the Confessor's reign, for all its piety, was merely a prelude to conquest, his childlessness a catalyst for monumental change. The end of Anglo-Saxon rule, as the formidable Norman threat gathered across the Channel, pushing England towards an inevitable, cataclysmic confrontation, the long, rich tapestry of Anglo-Saxon rule reached its abrupt and violent conclusion. The end of Anglo-Saxon rule was not a slow, gentle fade. It was a swift, brutal severance. Names, language, and power faded quickly, transforming a vibrant, millennium-old civilization into a conquered, subjugated territory, and irrevocably altering the cultural, linguistic, and political destiny of the island in the wake of a single, decisive battle. Horsetail banners, now Christian standards and dragon ensigns, lay trampled in the muddy fields, symbols of a defeated nation. The year 1066 was a crucible of destiny. King Harold Godwinson, having just achieved a stunning victory against a Norwegian Viking invasion at Stamford Bridge, was forced to march his exhausted army south to confront William of Normandy, who had landed his invasion fleet at Pevensey Bay. The Battle of Hastings, fought on October 14, 1066, was the decisive, epoch-defining moment. Listen to the terrifying clash of weapons, the deafening roar of combat, the guttural shouts of Norman knights, their French battle cries mingling with the desperate shouts of Anglo-Saxon warriors. Hear the splintering crack of shields, the thud of arrows, the desperate cries of men as the English shield wall, tenacious but exhausted, slowly began to break. See King Harold, a formidable warrior, fall to a Norman arrow, his death shattering the last vestiges of organized Anglo-Saxon resistance. Names, language, and power faded quickly. With Harold's death, the Anglo-Saxon ruling class was swiftly and systematically dispossessed. English earls, bishops, and landowners were replaced by William's Norman followers, creating a new foreign elite. The very names of power Harold, Leofric, Godric gave way to William, Robert, Roger. Old English, the vibrant language of Anglo-Saxon England, was immediately supplanted by Norman French as the language of the court, the administration, and the nobility. Latin remained the language of the church. For centuries, English became the language of the subjugated, evolving in the mud of the common people, absorbing countless French words, but profoundly altered. Its status diminished. The psychological impact was immense. For the Anglo-Saxon population, It was a period of profound cultural shock and brutal subjugation. Their laws, their customs, their entire way of life were challenged, replaced, or profoundly altered by the new Norman regime. The memory of their former independence, of their own kings, became a poignant, cherished, yet often dangerous thing, relegated to the whispers of memory. This sudden, violent rupture transformed the destiny of England, integrating it irrevocably into a wider continental European sphere, laying the foundations for a new Anglo-Norman identity. The Anglo-Saxon age, which had begun with distant dragon ships, ended with the thunder of Norman hooves, its final act a profound, irreversible shift. What the Anglo-Saxons left behind, as the final thunder of Norman hooves echoed across the battlefield of Hastings, marking the definitive, violent end of Anglo-Saxon rule, a new foreign chapter began for England. Yet, the memory of the defeated kingdom did not simply vanish. What the Anglo-Saxons left behind was a profound, enduring legacy, customs, words, and quiet foundations of England, transformed by conquest, but never truly erased, forever shaping the character of the English people, and underpinning the very fabric of the new Anglo-Norman realm with its subtle, pervasive echoes of an ancient, resilient past. William the Conqueror and his Norman followers imposed a new ruling elite, a new language, and a new feudal system. Yet, they could not entirely erase the centuries of Anglo-Saxon settlement, culture, and influence. The foundations were too deep, too pervasive, to be simply swept away. Listen to the low murmur of Old English words, spoken by peasants in the mud of the fields, their language slowly evolving, absorbing French, but never fully disappearing. Hear the echoes of Anglo-Saxon legal principles, subtly influencing the new Norman common law. See the intricate patterns of Anglo-Saxon place names, ending in ton, ham, ford, berry, that still dotted the landscape, marking their enduring claim to the land. Customs, words, and quiet foundations of England. The English language, though profoundly impacted by Norman French, did not die. It persisted among the common populace, gradually absorbing thousands of French words, simplifying its grammar, and eventually emerging as Middle English, a hybrid language, but one whose Germanic roots, its Anglo-Saxon spirit, remained powerfully present. The very structure of its grammar, its most fundamental vocabulary, were Anglo-Saxon gifts. Anglo-Saxon customs, traditions, and local governance practices, though overridden by Norman feudalism, often persisted at the local level, blending with new practices. The communal organization of villages, the traditional methods of agriculture, the celebration of certain feast days, these continued, subtly influencing the new order. The Anglo-Saxon Church, its saints and its liturgy, though reorganized under Norman bishops, retained much of its original character. The veneration of Anglo-Saxon saints continued, providing a spiritual continuity for the conquered people, and the quiet foundations of England itself. The concept of a unified English kingdom, the administrative structures developed by kings like Alfred, the idea of a distinct English identity, these were Anglo-Saxon legacies that the Normans inherited and ultimately built upon. William did not simply conquer England. He conquered an already existing, sophisticated state. The psychological impact was immense. For the English, the memory of their Anglo-Saxon past, however suppressed, became a profound source of identity and resilience. For the Normans, they became the inheritors of a rich, complex culture, which they gradually integrated into their new realm. This enduring legacy, etched in the very language of the land, became a timeless testament to a vanished people. What the Anglo-Saxons left behind transformed England, creating a new, hybrid nation, profoundly shaped by its Anglo-Saxon roots. Law and order after the raids. After decades of devastating Viking incursions, which had shattered Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and introduced a chaotic blend of legal traditions, the newly consolidated English monarchy faced the immense challenge of restoring stability. Law and order after the raids became a crucial, deliberate priority. Kings rebuilt authority through written law and taxation, transforming fragmented customs into a centralized, enforceable system and underpinning the nascent English state with a powerful administrative structure that dictated justice, ensured peace, and profoundly shaped the very fabric of daily life. The period following the Viking Age, particularly from the late 9th and 10th centuries, saw English kings Alfred the Great, Edward the Elder, and Athelstan meticulously work to re-establish royal authority across the entire island. This meant not just military reconquest of the Danelaw, but the systematic development of a uniform legal and administrative framework. Listen to the low murmur of scribes, diligently copying royal charters, legal codes, and administrative records in dimly lit monastic scriptoria. Hear the rhythmic tap of countless quills on precious vellum, as the vast bureaucracy of the English crown slowly took shape. See the king himself, no longer just a warrior, but a lawmaker, a patron of the church, and the supreme administrator of his realm, his face etched with wisdom and quiet determination, presiding over the reordering of society. Kings rebuilt authority through written law and taxation. Written law was paramount. Anglo-Saxon kings issued extensive, comprehensive law codes, meticulously detailing crimes, punishments, property rights, and social obligations. These laws, recorded in Old English, were designed to be applied uniformly across the kingdom, replacing the fragmented local customs and Danish legal traditions that had emerged during the Viking occupation. This brought a new degree of clarity, consistency, and royal authority to justice. Taxation was equally vital. A centralized system of royal taxation, such as the Danegeld, initially a tribute to Vikings, now repurposed as a national defense tax, and later land taxes, provided the necessary revenue to fund professional armies, maintain fortifications, and support the burgeoning royal administration. This direct financial link from peasant to king solidified royal power, bypassing intermediary lords where possible. The establishment of clear legal procedures and the enforcement of royal justice through shire and hundred courts ensured that order, however harsh, was maintained. Royal officials, like the sheriffs, acted as the king's direct representatives, overseeing justice and collecting taxes, ensuring the king's writ ran across the entire kingdom. The psychological impact was immense. For a populace weary of Viking raids and internal strife, the presence of a strong, unified legal system and a powerful king offered a profound sense of security and stability. It provided a predictable framework for life, reducing arbitrary violence and fostering a sense of shared English identity. This meticulous effort to rebuild law and order transformed England from a collection of fragmented, warring territories into a cohesive, centralized nation. The foundations were laid for a truly powerful medieval state, far more robust than its early Anglo-Saxon predecessors. A strong framework of order emerged, ensuring peace and stability. Law and order, after the raids, cemented the English monarchy's power, marking a profound chapter in Anglo-Saxon history. This was a calm, immersive journey through an island reforging its identity, charting the brutal rise of its political system, forever echoing with the quiet strength of enduring institutions, and the deep murmur of a nation finding stability through codified rule. Towns, trade, and coinage. After the formidable efforts of English kings to rebuild authority through written law and taxation, a parallel transformation revitalized the economic landscape of the Anglo-Saxon realm. Towns, trade, and coinage became the vibrant pulse of a new era. Markets and money quietly reshaped daily life, transforming local exchange into a sophisticated national network, and underpinning the burgeoning English state with an economic strength that rivaled its political consolidation, fostering prosperity and a new dynamic sense of urban identity. The long peace and stability achieved by kings like Alfred and Athelstan, coupled with the strategic network of burhs, fortified towns, provided an ideal environment for economic recovery and growth. These burhs, originally military strongholds, quickly evolved into vibrant centers of trade and industry, attracting merchants, artisans, and increasing populations. Listen to the cheerful shouts of vendors, their voices raw and insistent, calling out their wares from small stalls or from baskets carried on their heads. Fresh ale, good bread, finest wool, strong leather. Their cries, a constant competing chorus, filled the air, vying for attention, announcing the city's endless commerce. See the narrow, bustling streets, crammed with shops and workshops, their open fronts displaying a bewildering array of goods. Markets and money quietly reshaped daily life. Towns, whether ancient Roman foundations or newly established burhs, grew in size and importance. They became hubs where local agricultural produce was exchanged for crafted goods, pottery, textiles, tools, and for goods imported from other regions or, increasingly, from across the North Sea. The market, a vibrant social and economic nexus, was a daily testament to the kingdom's renewed vitality. Coinage was crucial to this economic flourishing. Anglo-Saxon kings, particularly from Athelstan onwards, maintained a remarkably strong and centralized monetary system based on the silver penny. Royal mints, controlled by the king, produced a consistent, high-quality currency that was trusted across the kingdom and beyond. This standardization facilitated trade, making transactions easier and more reliable, and actively stimulated economic growth. The psychological impact was immense. For the common person, the thriving markets offered access to a wider variety of goods, opportunities for trade, and a sense of growing prosperity. The consistent coinage provided stability, removing the uncertainties of barter. This economic dynamism fostered a new sense of urban identity, a pride in their thriving towns, and a tangible link to the king's ability to ensure order and wealth. This economic transformation, driven by robust towns and a stable currency, solidified the English monarchy's power, providing it with consistent revenue and a loyal, prosperous populace. It was the material bedrock upon which a powerful, unified English state was built. A vibrant economy, bustling with exchange and growing wealth, now flourished. Towns, trade, and coinage built the foundations of a new era in Anglo-Saxon England. This was a calm, immersive journey through an island forging its identity, charting the economic rise of its political system, forever echoing with the quiet strength of enduring commerce and the deep murmur of a nation finding stability through prosperity. The power of the church. The power of the church was an unyielding, omnipresent reality. Bishops and monasteries rivaled kings in influence, transforming spiritual authority into a profound pillar of governance, and underpinning the evolving English state with a moral framework, a system of law, and an intellectual bedrock that profoundly shaped every aspect of daily life, from royal courts to humble peasant huts. Following the Christianization of Anglo-Saxon England, which had begun centuries earlier, the church rapidly became an immensely powerful and organized institution. Its influence permeated every level of society, from the king's court to the smallest village. Bishops, abbots, and abbesses often came from noble families, wielding significant secular as well as spiritual power, advising kings, holding vast estates, and commanding considerable resources. Listen to the solemn chanting of monks, their voices low and resonant, echoing through the vast, cool libraries of monasteries like Winchester or Canterbury. Hear the authoritative pronouncements of bishops, their words carrying the weight of both divine law and considerable earthly influence, addressing royal councils or presiding over ecclesiastical courts. See the magnificent stone cathedrals and sprawling monastic complexes, towering over towns and villages, physical declarations of the church's immense wealth and spiritual authority. Bishops and monasteries rivaled kings in influence. Bishops, often key advisors to kings, held vast landholdings and commanded their own retinues. They sat in royal councils, influencing policy diplomacy, and even military decisions. Abbots and abbesses governed powerful monastic communities, which were not only centers of prayer and learning, but also significant landowners and economic forces engaged in trade, agriculture, and the production of goods. The Church provided the moral and legal framework for much of Anglo-Saxon society. Canon law, based on Christian teachings, governed matters of marriage, family, and personal morality, often intersecting with secular law. Priests, present in every village, provided spiritual guidance, administered sacraments, and acted as local moral arbiters, shaping the daily lives and beliefs of the common folk. Monasteries were intellectual powerhouses, preserving classical texts, producing illuminated manuscripts, and educating future leaders. They were the primary centers of literacy and scholarship, nurturing a vibrant intellectual culture that drew on both Latin and Old English traditions. Their libraries became vital repositories of knowledge, connecting England to the wider Christian world. The psychological impact was immense. The constant awareness of the Church's pervasive authority, its power to grant salvation or condemn to damnation, profoundly shaped their moral choices. It provided a framework for understanding their world, their suffering, and their hopes for the afterlife, offering a powerful spiritual anchor in a turbulent age. This powerful influence ensured a fragile social cohesion in a turbulent age. The Church, in its wealth and organization, became an indispensable partner to the monarchy, providing not just spiritual legitimacy, but also administrative support, intellectual resources, and a pervasive moral order. A kingdom that felt permanent. A kingdom that felt permanent was a precious, hard-won reality. England entered a rare moment of stability, transforming a fragmented past into a flourishing, sophisticated nation, underpinning its cultural richness with robust governance, and creating a unique identity, utterly unaware of this seismic change gathering on the horizon. By the mid-11th century, after the turbulent period of Viking incursions and the subsequent reign of Canute the Great, England, under kings like Edward the Confessor, had achieved a remarkable degree of internal peace and economic flourishing. It was, by many measures, one of the most organized and wealthiest kingdoms in Western Europe, with a sophisticated administrative system, a thriving agrarian economy, and a rich cultural heritage. Listen to the low murmur of bustling markets. There sounds a cacophony of vendors, hagglers, and citizens engaged in lively commerce. Hear the rhythmic clang of blacksmiths' hammers, tirelessly shaping iron for tools and plowshares, their rhythm a testament to ceaseless industry. See the vast, fertile fields, meticulously cultivated, stretching across the landscape, producing abundant grain and supporting a thriving agricultural economy. England entered a rare moment of stability. The English monetary system, based on the silver penny, was remarkably strong and well-regulated, facilitating extensive trade both domestically and with continental Europe. Towns were growing, their markets vibrant, their populations expanding. A complex system of shires and hundreds, administered by royal officials, sheriffs, ensured law and order across the kingdom, providing a predictable framework for daily life. The Church in England was deeply established, with magnificent cathedrals and prosperous monasteries serving as centers of spiritual life, learning, and cultural production. Old English, in its late form, was a vibrant living language, used for both administrative records and a rich body of literature, including poetry, chronicles, and religious texts. King Edward the Confessor, though pious and somewhat detached, ruled over a largely peaceful and prosperous realm. His court, while increasingly influenced by Norman customs due to his long exile, remained fundamentally Anglo-Saxon in its composition and character, balancing tradition with subtle change. The psychological impact was immense. Generations had known relative peace, prosperity, and a stable, well-ordered society. There was a profound sense of continuity, a belief that their way of life, their Anglo-Saxon identity, their kingdom was enduring, permanent, destined to continue indefinitely. This hard-won stability was cherished, a collective sigh of relief after centuries of turmoil. Succession and fragile peace. Succession and fragile peace became the defining tension of the late Anglo-Saxon era. The death of a king reopened old dangers, transforming a seemingly stable realm into a precarious landscape of competing claims and simmering rivalries, and setting the stage for a cataclysmic, inevitable shift in England's destiny. Edward the Confessor, the pious king who presided over this era of peace, was childless. In a monarchy where the succession was typically hereditary, the absence of a direct heir created an acute, profound crisis. Who would succeed him? This question became the most pressing, the most dangerous, and ultimately the most destructive political challenge of his reign. Listen to the hushed whispers of political intrigue, traveling like wildfire through the court and across the land, as powerful noble families maneuvered for influence, positioning their own candidates for the vacant throne. Hear the authoritative pronouncements of powerful earls, like the formidable Godwin family of Wessex asserting their rights, their influence, their claims to the succession. See the king himself, often portrayed as a pious, somewhat detached monarch, his face etched with weariness, grappling with a problem that threatened to unravel all the hard-won stability. The death of a king reopened old dangers. The Anglo-Saxon system of succession, while generally hereditary, also allowed for the Wit na Gemot, the council of wise men, to elect a king from the royal house, particularly in the absence of a clear heir. This made the succession highly contested, opening the door to rival claimants, both domestic and foreign. The primary domestic claimant was Harold Godwinson, Earl of Wessex, the most powerful English nobleman, brother-in-law to Edward, and a figure of immense political and military standing. Across the Channel, William, Duke of Normandy, also asserted a claim based on an alleged promise from Edward and a sworn oath from Harold. And in Scandinavia, Harald Hardrada, the King of Norway, laid his own claim, rooted in earlier Viking agreements. The fragile peace of Edward's reign, which had felt so permanent, was perpetually shadowed by this impending crisis. The king's long-standing connections to Normandy, his appointment of Norman favorites to positions of influence, and his possible promise of the throne to William, further inflamed Anglo-Saxon resentment and deepened the sense of an impending external threat. The psychological impact was immense. The knowledge of the impending succession crisis, the whispers of foreign ambition, and the memory of past Viking invasions bred profound anxiety across England. The hard-won unity felt increasingly precarious, threatening to dissolve into civil war or foreign conquest. This profound political tension, centered on the question of succession, ultimately became the catalyst for the definitive end of Anglo-Saxon England, leading to the dramatic events of 1066. New threats from across the sea. New threats from across the sea became a chilling, pervasive reality. Norman ambition gathered quietly in Normandy, transforming the political landscape of the English Channel into a crucible of escalating tension, and foreshadowing the profound, brutal end of an ancient age with the methodical preparations of a powerful, determined duke. Across the English Channel, in the powerful Duchy of Normandy, Duke William, a formidable and ruthless ruler, nurtured a fierce ambition. He claimed the English throne based on an alleged promise from Edward the Confessor, and a sworn oath supposedly made by Harold Godwinson. For years, he had been meticulously consolidating his power, building his reputation, and systematically laying the groundwork for what would be the most audacious conquest of his age. Listen to the rhythmic clang of smiths' hammers, working tirelessly in Norman forges, shaping immense quantities of iron into mail, helmets, and swords, the tools of a vast impending conquest. Hear the shouts of master shipwrights, their voices echoing through the shipyards, directing the felling of forests, the shaping of timber, the construction of hundreds of transport ships. See the vast forests of Normandy, slowly being transformed into a formidable fleet, its hulls slowly taking shape, awaiting the command to cross. Norman ambition gathered quietly in Normandy. William was a master of strategy and logistics. He meticulously gathered intelligence on England's defenses, assessed the political landscape, and cultivated support from the papacy, securing a powerful moral endorsement for his claim. He assembled a formidable invasion force, a vast army of Norman, Breton, and Flemish knights, archers and infantry, all professional soldiers, eager for land and glory. The scale of his preparations was unprecedented. Thousands of horses, essential for his cavalry, had to be gathered and trained. Immense quantities of food, water, and military equipment had to be stockpiled. The construction of hundreds of transport ships, capable of carrying men and horses across the Channel, was a monumental undertaking, absorbing vast resources and manpower. The psychological impact was immense. The knowledge of William's preparations, the whispers of his ambition, spread across the Channel, creating a pervasive sense of apprehension across England. The narrow strip of water, once a protective barrier, now felt like a conduit for an inevitable, overwhelming invasion. The fragile peace of Edward's reign was increasingly overshadowed by this distant yet terrifying threat. This gathering storm was the ultimate external pressure, destined to shatter the Anglo-Saxon world and to integrate England irrevocably into a wider continental European sphere, forever altering its destiny. England on the eve of 1066, as the formidable Norman threat gathered quietly across the Channel, its ambition a relentless drumbeat of preparation. England, under its new Anglo-Saxon king, Harold Godwinson, stood poised on the precipice of a cataclysmic, yet largely unseen, shift. England on the eve of 1066 was a complex, prosperous realm, a stable world that felt permanent, transforming centuries of conflict into a flourishing, sophisticated nation, underpinning its cultural richness with robust governance, and utterly unaware of the three-pronged assault that would soon shatter its identity. Stone churches, sturdy and proud, echoed with the solemn chants of Latin, while Old English, vibrant and alive, filled homes and fields, defining a cohesive, familiar world. England in 1066 was not a backward, vulnerable kingdom. It was, by many measures, one of the most organized, prosperous, and militarily capable states in Western Europe. Its economy was thriving, its administrative system sophisticated, and its military, centered on the formidable Fyrd, militia, and the elite housecarls, was well-drilled and powerful. Listen to the low murmur of bustling markets. There sounds a cacophony of vendors, hagglers, and citizens engaged in lively commerce. Hear the rhythmic clang of blacksmiths' hammers, tirelessly shaping iron for tools and plowshares, their rhythm a testament to ceaseless industry. See the vast, fertile fields meticulously cultivated, stretching across the landscape, producing abundant grain and supporting a thriving agricultural economy. A stable world that felt permanent. The English monetary system, based on the silver penny, was remarkably strong and well-regulated, facilitating extensive trade both domestically and with continental Europe. Towns were growing, their markets vibrant, their populations expanding. A complex system of shires and hundreds, administered by royal officials, sheriffs, ensured law and order across the kingdom, providing a predictable framework for daily life. King Harold Godwinson, crowned immediately after Edward the Confessor's death, was a powerful, capable, and experienced leader. He quickly mobilized his forces, preparing to defend his kingdom against the inevitable Norman invasion. Yet his attention was tragically split by a second equally formidable threat. Harald Hardrada, the King of Norway, a legendary Viking warrior, also laid claim to the English throne. He landed his vast invasion fleet in northern England in September 1066, forcing Harold to march his army rapidly north, covering immense distances to meet this unexpected challenge. The psychological impact was immense. The English people having enjoyed decades of relative peace, faced the terrifying prospect of a three-pronged assault from Norway, from Normandy, and potentially from within their own kingdom due to shifting allegiances. The sense of an impending cataclysmic storm was palpable, even if its full scale was not yet understood. This complex web of claims, ambitions, and preparations created a moment of profound tension. England, thriving and confident, was utterly unaware of the seismic, irreversible change that would occur in a matter of months, a change that would redefine its very identity. The collapse of Anglo-Saxon rule, as England, prosperous and seemingly permanent, stood on the precipice of an unimaginable storm, facing the twin threats of Harold Hardrada's Viking invasion and William of Normandy as ambitious conquest. The inevitable, tragic collision of these forces would usher in a new, brutal reality. The collapse of Anglo-Saxon rule was not a slow, gentle fade. Power shifted faster than people could understand, transforming centuries of tradition into a broken past and irrevocably altering the cultural, linguistic, and political destiny of the island in the wake of a single, decisive, devastating battle. Horsetail banners, now Christian standards and dragon ensigns, lay trampled in the muddy fields, symbols of a defeated nation. The year 1066 proved to be an unparalleled crucible of destiny, a dramatic, unparalleled collision of ambitions. King Harold Godwinson, having just achieved a stunning victory against a Norwegian Viking invasion at the Battle of Stamford Bridge on September 25th, was forced to make an agonizing decision. Barely recovered from the brutal northern campaign, he received news of William of Normandy's landing in the south at Pevensey Bay on September 28th. Listen to the terrifying clash of weapons, the deafening roar of combat, the guttural shouts of Norman knights, their French battle cries mingling with the desperate shouts of Anglo-Saxon warriors. Hear the splintering crack of shields, the thud of arrows, the desperate cries of men as the English shield wall, tenacious but exhausted, slowly began to break. See King Harold, a formidable warrior, fall to a Norman arrow, his death shattering the last vestiges of organized Anglo-Saxon resistance. Power shifted faster than people could understand. Harold's exhausted army, having force-marched hundreds of miles south at William's fresh, well-equipped Norman forces at the Battle of Hastings on October 14, 1066. The battle raged for a full day, a brutal, relentless grind. The Anglo-Saxon shield wall, a testament to their enduring discipline, held firm for hours. But ultimately, through a combination of Norman tactical superiority, their own fatigue, and the tragic death of King Harold himself, the English lines broke. With Harold's death, the Anglo-Saxon ruling class was swiftly and systematically decapitated. English earls, bishops, and landowners were replaced by William's Norman followers, creating a new foreign elite. The very names of Power Harold, Leofric, Godric gave way to William Robert Roger. The ancient Anglo-Saxon system of governance, its laws, its customs, its language all were either immediately replaced or profoundly altered, often within a matter of weeks and months. The psychological impact was immense. For the Anglo-Saxon population, it was a period of profound cultural shock and brutal subjugation. Their language, their laws, their customs, their entire way of life were challenged, replaced, or profoundly altered by the new Norman regime. The memory of their former independence, of their own kings, became a poignant, cherished, yet often dangerous thing, relegated to the whispers of memory. This sudden, violent rupture transformed the destiny of England, integrating it irrevocably into a wider continental European sphere, laying the foundations for a new Anglo-Norman identity. The Anglo-Saxon age, which had begun with distant dragon ships, ended with the thunder of Norman hooves, its final act a profound, irreversible shift. Lives disrupted overnight became a chilling, pervasive reality. Language, law, and identity changed abruptly, transforming the stable world of centuries into a bewildering, often brutal, new existence, and perpetually binding the conquered English to the unyielding will of their foreign masters. Stone fortresses, newly raised, loomed ominously over villages, silent symbols of absolute power. William the Conqueror's victory was swift and absolute. He did not merely defeat an army. He conquered a kingdom, imposing a new ruling elite and fundamentally altering the social and administrative fabric of England. For the vast majority of the Anglo-Saxon population, their world, which had felt permanent just months before, was abruptly and irrevocably turned upside down. Listen to the authoritative shouts of Norman guards, their commands delivered in a harsh, guttural Norman French, replacing the familiar sounds of Old English governance. Hear the low murmur of bewildered English peasants, their voices hushed, their anger suppressed, as they struggled to understand the new language of their masters, their subtle accents marking them as subjugated. See the grim faces of Anglo-Saxon nobles, dispossessed of their lands and titles, replaced by William's Norman followers. Their former authority vanished. Language, law, and identity changed abruptly. Norman French became the language of power of the court, the administration, and the nobility. Old English, the vibrant tongue of their ancestors, was relegated to the status of a peasant dialect, its richness, its complexities suddenly devalued. For generations, the conquered would struggle with this linguistic barrier, their voices muted in the halls of power. Law transformed. The Anglo-Saxon system of customary law, administered through shire and hundred courts, was gradually replaced or profoundly influenced by Norman feudal law. New legal concepts, new forms of land tenure, new judicial processes were imposed, fundamentally altering their rights, their obligations, and their understanding of justice. Identity shifted. Anglo-Saxon leaders were replaced by Normans. Anglo-Saxon customs were challenged. The very symbols of their heritage were supplanted. For a people whose identity was so deeply rooted in their language, their land, and their customs, this abrupt transformation was a profound shock, breeding resentment and a sense of profound loss. The psychological impact was immense. The sudden, violent imposition of a foreign culture, a foreign language, and a foreign ruling class left a deep scar on the Anglo-Saxon psyche. The sense of profound injustice, of utter powerlessness, of a world turned upside down, permeated daily life. This was not a gradual assimilation. It was an abrupt, often brutal, disruption. The effects of the conquest resonated through every aspect of society, shaping the destinies of countless individuals. What survived the conquest? What survived the conquest was a profound, enduring legacy. Words, customs, and quiet foundations endured beneath new rulers, transforming the trauma of subjugation into a resilient cultural undercurrent, perpetually shaping the character of the English people and underpinning the very fabric of the new Anglo-Norman realm, with its subtle, pervasive echoes of an ancient, tenacious past. Moonlight glimmering on newly built Norman castles, now standing over silent Anglo-Saxon burial mounds, illuminates a world where old and new entwined. William the Conqueror and his Norman followers imposed a new ruling elite, a new language, and a new feudal system. Yet they could not entirely erase the centuries of Anglo-Saxon settlement, culture, and influence. The foundations were too deep, too pervasive, to be simply swept away. The conquered retained aspects of their heritage, which, over time, would subtly reassert themselves. Listen to the low murmur of Old English words, spoken by peasants in the mud of the fields, their language slowly evolving, absorbing French, but never fully disappearing. Hear the echoes of Anglo-Saxon legal principles, subtly influencing the new Norman common law. See the intricate patterns of Anglo-Saxon place names ending in ton, ham, ford, berry, that still dotted the landscape, marking their enduring claim to the land. Words, customs, and quiet foundations endured beneath new rulers. The English language, though profoundly impacted by Norman French, did not die. Old English, relegated to the common populace, continued to evolve, absorbing thousands of French words, simplifying its grammar, and eventually emerging as Middle English, a hybrid language, but one whose Germanic roots, its Anglo-Saxon spirit, remained powerfully present, a testament to its linguistic resilience. Anglo-Saxon customs and legal principles, though overridden by Norman feudalism, often persisted at the local level, blending with new practices. The communal organization of villages, the traditional methods of agriculture, the celebration of certain feast days, these continued, subtly influencing the new order. The very structure of English administration, the shire and hundred system, was retained and adapted by the Normans. The Anglo-Saxon Church, its saints and its liturgy, though reorganized under Norman bishops, retained much of its original character. The veneration of Anglo-Saxon saints continued, providing a spiritual continuity for the conquered people. The psychological impact was immense. For the English, the preservation of these elements of their culture, however subtle, provided a crucial anchor in a bewildering new world. It fostered a sense of continuity, a quiet strength, a reminder that their identity, though changed, was not entirely erased. This enduring legacy, etched in the very language of the land, became a timeless testament to a vanished people. What survived the conquest transformed England, creating a new, hybrid nation, profoundly shaped by its Anglo-Saxon roots, a testament to the resilience of a defeated yet enduring culture. Part 7. After the Anglo-Saxon, living under new lords. The thunder of Norman hooves had faded from the muddy fields of Hastings, and the echoes of Anglo-Saxon battle cries had been swallowed by the wind. For the vast majority of England's populace, the immediate aftermath of conquest meant a profound, bewildering shift in the very fabric of their daily existence. Old lives continued beneath unfamiliar names and accents, transforming the familiar rhythms of village life into a new, often harsher, reality of subjugation, perpetually reminded of their changed status under a foreign, unyielding authority. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the earthy scent of wood smoke, freshly turned soil, and the subtle tang of human presence, now mingling with the sharp, precise tones of a foreign tongue. The sounds were no longer the comforting cadence of Old English governance. They included the crisp, authoritative commands of Norman French, the mournful cries of displaced families, and the rhythmic clang of new castle construction. Stone castles, newly raised, loomed ominously over existing settlements, symbols of a new, absolute power. William the Conqueror, now King of England, systematically replaced the Anglo-Saxon aristocracy with his Norman, Breton, and Flemish followers. This meant that the lord of the manor, the man who held ultimate dominion over the land, its resources, and its people, was no longer a familiar face. Instead, a new foreign lord, speaking an alien language, arrived to claim his spoils. Listen to the authoritative shouts of Norman reeves or bailiffs, their commands delivered in a harsh, guttural Norman French, replacing the familiar sounds of Anglo-Saxon authority. Hear the low murmur of bewildered English peasants, their voices hushed, their anger suppressed, as they struggled to understand the new language of their masters, their subtle accents marking them as subjugated. See the grim faces of Anglo-Saxon tenants, bowing low, their posture one of absolute deference, before a new lord whose very presence radiated a foreign power. Old lives continued beneath unfamiliar names and accents. The fundamental tasks of peasant life, plowing, sowing, harvesting, tending animals, remained unchanged. The land still demanded its toil. The seasons still dictated their rhythm. But the context was irrevocably altered. Their customary rights, their traditional obligations, were now filtered through the lens of Norman feudal law, often harsher, more demanding, and less flexible than the Anglo-Saxon customs they replaced. The names on the charters, the pronouncements in court, the language of command, all shifted to Norman French and Latin. The new lords brought their own customs, their own legal practices, their own architectural styles, gradually transforming the landscape and the social fabric of England. This pervasive imposition was a constant daily reminder of their defeat, of their changed status. The psychological impact was immense. For the Anglo-Saxon population, it was a period of profound cultural shock and brutal subjugation. The displacement of their own ruling class, the imposition of foreign customs, the difficulty of communicating with their new masters, these bred resentment, a sense of profound injustice, and a quiet despair. Their lives, though outwardly continuing, were now lived under the shadow of foreign rule. This subtle yet pervasive shift in authority shaped the very character of English society for centuries. The memory of the conquest, the reality of living under new lords, became an indelible part of their collective identity, a testament to enduring resilience amidst profound change. The silent endurance of a subjugated populace began. Living under new lords irrevocably altered England, marking a profound chapter in Anglo-Saxon history. This was a calm, immersive journey through an island transformed by conquest, charting the subtle changes in daily life. Forever tethered to the quiet echoes of foreign accents and the deep murmur of ancestral memory, in a land now bearing the indelible mark of a new, powerful, and utterly alien authority. Language beneath language. Beneath the stern gaze of new Norman lords, who spoke their precise, commanding French, the ancient heart of England's identity found its most resilient refuge not in defiant shouts, but in quiet persistence. English survived quietly under Norman French rule, a profound, tenacious linguistic struggle. Language beneath language, transforming the native tongue into an underground current, perpetually adapting and underpinning a new, hybrid nation with the enduring echoes of ancestral words that refused to disappear. The cold, damp air, laden with the unfamiliar cadences of Norman French from the castle, carried a subtle tension. Inside the humble Saxon huts, the scent of wood smoke and damp earth mingled with the sounds of daily life, now punctuated by the low murmur of Old English. This was the linguistic reality of post-conquest England, a profound cultural divide. William the Conqueror's victory in 1066 imposed a new linguistic hierarchy. Norman French, a Romance language with Germanic influences, became the language of power, of the court, the administration, the law, and the nobility. Latin remained the language of the church and high scholarship. Old English, the vibrant tongue of Alfred and Bede, was abruptly relegated to the status of a peasant dialect. Yet Old English, spoken by the vast majority of the subjugated population, did not die. It persisted in homes, in fields, in markets, in the quiet corners of villages. It evolved, slowly, organically, absorbing thousands of French words, particularly those related to governance, law, and nobility, while retaining its core Germanic grammar and vocabulary. This was the silent, profound transformation from Old English to Middle English. The quiet persistence of the common tongue was a testament to the resilience of the Anglo-Saxon people. Their ancestral words, their grammatical structures, their rhythms of speech formed an unyielding bedrock beneath the imposed Norman overlay. Children learned French in the lord's household, perhaps, but they spoke English at their mother's knee. This was a language beneath language, an enduring cultural undercurrent. While French might dominate the official records and courtly conversations, English permeated the daily interactions, the folk tales, the songs, and the communal life of the vast majority. It was the language of the hearth, the farm, the market, constantly adapting, absorbing, and transforming itself. The psychological impact of this linguistic subjugation was immense. For the English, it created a profound sense of linguistic isolation from their rulers, reinforcing their subordinate status. But it also fostered a deep, unspoken pride in their own resilient tongue, a quiet defiance that resisted complete assimilation. Over centuries, this blending, this linguistic struggle, would give birth to a new language, Middle English, a rich, complex hybrid that would eventually rise to become the language of Chaucer, and later, Shakespeare, ultimately reasserting its dominance and becoming the foundation of modern English. This enduring linguistic legacy, a silent testament to survival, forever shaped the character of the English people. Laws that refused to disappear. Beyond the subtle, tenacious survival of their native tongue, beneath the Norman overlay, the conquered Anglo-Saxons found another bedrock of their former identity that defied complete erasure. Laws that refused to disappear were a chilling, pervasive truth. Customary justice endured in villages and fields, transforming a brutal conquest into a complex legal hybridization, and underpinning the new Anglo-Norman realm with persistent echoes of ancient Anglo-Saxon principles, perpetually reminding them of their nuanced, layered heritage. Imagine the cold, damp air, thick with the earthy scent of parchment, old stone, and the subtle tang of human presence, mingling with the crisp, precise tones of Norman French. The sounds were no longer the clang of invading armies. They included the low murmur of villagers debating local disputes, the authoritative voice of a Norman sheriff, and the rhythmic scratch of a quill recording judgments. Stone castles, newly raised, cast long shadows over village moots, where ancient customs still held sway. William the Conqueror, after 1066, did not simply impose an entirely new legal system. While he introduced Norman feudal law, a more centralized and top-down approach, he also pragmatically retained many existing Anglo-Saxon legal customs and institutions, particularly at the local level. This created a complex, often overlapping, legal landscape that would define English law for centuries. Listen to the low murmur of villagers, their voices hushed, as they gathered for the 100 court or shire court, ancient Anglo-Saxon assemblies that continued to meet. Hear the authoritative voice of the Norman sheriff, now presiding over these Anglo-Saxon institutions, his words a mix of French and Latin, adapting to local custom. See the scribes, their quills poised, meticulously recording proceedings, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in a hybrid legal English. Customary justice endured in villages and fields. For the common Anglo-Saxon peasant, their daily interactions with the law were often still governed by familiar local customs. Disputes over land boundaries, petty thefts, minor assaults, these were often resolved in the traditional village courts, or by the Lord's Manor Court, which continued to draw on pre-conquest precedents and practices. The old forms of trial, such as compurgation, oath-taking with oath helpers, or trial by ordeal, persisted for a time, reflecting a deep-seated trust in traditional justice. The Wergeld, the Anglo-Saxon system of man prices for various crimes, compensation paid to the victim's family, while gradually superseded by Norman concepts of royal justice, lingered in certain forms, particularly for minor offenses or within customary practice. The notion of communal responsibility for maintaining order, deeply ingrained in Anglo-Saxon society, also continued to shape local governance. The psychological impact of this legal continuity was immense. For the conquered English, the persistence of their ancient legal customs offered a crucial anchor in a bewildering new world. It provided a sense of fairness, a connection to their heritage, and a degree of predictability in a justice system otherwise dominated by foreign overlords. It reinforced a subtle yet powerful sense of their own identity. Over centuries, this blend of Anglo-Saxon and Norman legal traditions would gradually evolve into English common law, a unique system that drew heavily from both inheritances, shaping the legal destiny of England, and eventually, much of the English-speaking world. This enduring legal legacy, a silent testament to the resilience of custom, forever shaped the character of the English people. The peasantry remained. The peasantry remained. Conquest changed rulers, not daily labor, transforming a monumental political upheaval into a persistent, unyielding cycle of toil. and underscoring the resilience of ordinary lives perpetually bound to the land, enduring in quiet strength beneath the new Norman shadow. Stone castles, newly raised, cast long shadows over fields where generations had always toiled. William the Conqueror's victory and the subsequent Norman yoke brought a dramatic change in England's ruling class, its aristocracy, and its administrative language. Anglo-Saxon earls were replaced by Norman barons, their loyalties redirected to the new king. But at the bottom of the social hierarchy, the vast majority of the population, the peasants, particularly the serfs, found their daily lives remarkably, grimly consistent. Listen to the rhythmic creak of the wooden plow, groaning as it cut through the stubborn, damp earth, turning over shallow furrows. Hear the low, strained lowing of the oxen, their powerful bodies straining against their yokes, their breath pluming white in the cold air. See the long, dark lines of newly turned earth stretching behind you, a testament to relentless, back-breaking toil, slowly transforming the field into a canvas for cultivation. Conquest changed rulers, not daily labor. The fundamental tasks of peasant life, plowing, sowing, harvesting, hauling wood, tending animals, remained largely the same. The land still demanded its toil. The seasons still dictated their rhythm. Their days, from dawn till dusk, were consumed by the same physical exertion, the same relentless cycle of agrarian labor. Their new Norman lords still demanded feudal service and rents. These obligations, though sometimes harsher or more formalized than under the Anglo-Saxons, were familiar in principle. Peasants still owed labor on the lord's domain, still paid a portion of their harvest, still relied on the lord's mill and oven. The details of their subjugation might have altered, but the core reality of their unfree status and their ceaseless toil remained immutable. The psychological impact was immense. For the peasant, who rarely saw the king or engaged in high politics, the change of overlord, however violent, often felt distant, another burden to be borne. Their resilience, their quiet endurance, was a testament to their deep connection to the land and their unwavering commitment to survival. They simply continued, as they always had, bending their backs to the soil, ensuring their families had enough to eat. This enduring labor of the peasantry was the ultimate foundation of the new Norman realm. It provided the food, the wealth, and the stability upon which the new ruling class built its power. They were the silent engine of England, a constant, unchanging force beneath the upheaval. The silent endurance of a subjugated populace, tied to the land, continued. The peasantry remained the bedrock of a new England. Churches, saints, and memory. After the profound political upheaval of the Norman conquest and the continued, unwavering toil of the peasantry, the spiritual landscape of England also experienced a transformation. Churches, saints, and memory intertwined as a vital, relentless process. Faith adapted without fully surrendering its past, transforming spiritual traditions into a complex hybridization, and underpinning the new Anglo-Norman realm with persistent echoes of ancient Anglo-Saxon piety, perpetually reminding them of their nuanced, layered heritage. Stone castles, newly raised, cast long shadows over towering cathedrals, symbols of a new unified spiritual and temporal power. William the Conqueror's victory and the subsequent Norman yoke brought a significant shift in the leadership of the English Church. Anglo-Saxon bishops and abbots were systematically replaced by Normans, who brought with them new administrative practices, new architectural styles, Romanesque, and a closer alignment with the Reformed papacy on the continent. Listen to the solemn chanting of Latin liturgy echoing through the vast, cool naves of newly built Norman cathedrals, their grandeur a visual declaration of a new ecclesiastical order. Hear the low murmur of worshippers, their prayers a blend of Latin and the evolving English, as they sought solace and spiritual guidance. See the majestic stone cathedrals, their massive forms dominating the landscape, often built on the sites of older Anglo-Saxon churches or monasteries, physically asserting the new spiritual authority. Faith adapted without fully surrendering its past. While Norman bishops introduced new customs, reorganized dioceses, and emphasized stricter adherence to Roman liturgy, the deeply ingrained Anglo-Saxon religious traditions did not simply vanish. The veneration of Anglo-Saxon saints, such as Cuthbert, Edmund, and Edward the Confessor, persisted among the common populace, even if their cults were sometimes viewed with suspicion by the new Norman clergy. The memory of the Anglo-Saxon Church, its saints, its spiritual leaders, and its rich monastic culture remained a powerful, enduring force. Anglo-Saxon texts, preserved in monasteries, continued to be copied and studied, ensuring the continuity of a distinct English spiritual and intellectual heritage, albeit within a new Norman-dominated framework. The psychological impact was immense. For the Anglo-Saxon population, the Church remained a crucial source of spiritual comfort and identity. The familiarity of certain saints, the enduring power of local shrines, the persistence of traditional prayers, these provided an anchor in a bewildering new world. For the Normans, the integration of these Anglo-Saxon elements helped to legitimize their rule, blending old and new into a cohesive spiritual landscape. This complex interplay between Norman imposition and Anglo-Saxon resilience profoundly shaped the character of the English Church, creating a unique hybrid that would define medieval English Christianity for centuries to come. The enduring spirit of a subjugated populace, tied to their faith, continued. Churches, saints, and memory cemented the spiritual foundations of a new England. And so, the long journey of the Anglo-Saxons slows and finally comes to rest. What began as quiet crossings over cold seas, families stepping onto a broken island after Rome, became centuries of labor, belief, conflict, and endurance. Forests were cleared. Fields were carved from soil and stone. Wooden halls rose, dark with smoke and voices. Laws were spoken aloud before they were written. Gods were whispered to, and later replaced by prayers. Generations lived without knowing the shape of history. They knew only the seasons, the weight of land, the warmth of fire, and the fear of what might arrive from the horizon. Kings ruled briefly. Kingdoms rose and fell. Borders shifted like shadows across fields. And still, ordinary life continued. Planting, harvesting, sleeping, surviving. Even invasion became routine. Vikings arrived not as an ending, but as another chapter, their blood, words, and laws slowly blending into the land. By the time England felt whole, it was already changing again. The year 1066 did not erase the Anglo-Saxons overnight. Their language softened into English. Their laws echoed beneath Norman rule. Their villages remained where they had always been, quiet, patient, enduring. History often remembers conquests, but most of life happens in between them. In fields, homes, and long nights where people simply tried to live. Now the age fades gently, not with a final battle cry, but with a slow exhale across time. The halls grow quiet, the fires dim, the land sleeps, carrying its memories beneath the soil. You have walked through centuries. You may rest now. Good night, and let the quiet history of the Anglo-Saxons drift softly into sleep.